Good morning. If I can call the meeting to order, please. Before we take public speakers, I just would like to welcome back our representatives from our unions and our writers group. Appreciate the fact that you're back on the board, and appreciate the fact that Albany found a way to rectify its mistake. So welcome back to the board. Doug, I assume we have a few public speakers.
We do have a couple. Our first speaker is Bill Henderson from the PCAC, and he'll be followed by the Honorable Christine Quinn, New York City Council. Bill Henderson, PCAC. Are you here? Okay. And then the Speaker of the City Council, the Honorable Christine Quinn.
Good morning to the board. First, I want to express our appreciation to the staff of the MTA and operating agencies for their efforts, and for those members of the board who attended multiple public hearings. It's obvious to us, and we believe to the riders, that the concerns and proposals that were presented were heard and taken seriously. We're pleased to see that service reductions such as slashing of service between Greenport and Ronkonkoma, cancellation of a large portion of Port Jervis service, and elimination of some bus services has been taken off the table. Our top priority has always been the preservation of service. Despite adjustment in the cuts, many riders will still lose essential service, and a great deal of pain will be imposed. The issue of student fares has been deferred and not resolved. Seen in this light, the recommended actions before you today are a failure. But I want to be clear that the primary responsibility for this failure lies with our elected officials, who are consistently falling short of their responsibility to provide adequate, stable, and reliable funding for the long-term health of our transportation system. We've seen the results of this failure for years. Whether it's inadequate funding to meet city and state obligations to students, insufficient capital funding that forced the MTA to borrow to prevent the system from falling apart, the use of dedicated tax funds to pay operating assistance properly funded from general revenues, or the extraction of $143 million from an MTA already reeling from massive shortfalls. The decision that led us to this point were primarily made in Albany and City Hall, and not in this room. I urge this board and the riders to continue to insist that Albany and City Hall be the major part of the solution. It's a difficult time at all levels of government, but this isn't going to get any easier. There's another tax revenue shortfall on the horizon, and the clock is ticking. We all need to demand that our elected officials give our transportation system the attention it deserves. We fully support making the system more efficient, but efficiencies won't solve the problem, and there's very little left to cut that will not cause permanent damage. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, the Honorable Christine Quinn, Speaker of the New York City Council, to be followed by Lawrence Carter Long.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. 2 weeks ago, I stood here at the doors of the MTA headquarters and delivered over 40,000 petition signatures from New Yorkers around the 5 boroughs. New Yorkers who oppose the drastic service cuts the MTA board will be voting on today. These 40,000 petition signatures are just a drop in the bucket when it comes to the real number of New Yorkers who are opposed to, worried, and on some level many frantic about the cuts that will get implemented today. You all know that millions of commuters depend on our buses, subways, and accessorized service every day to make sure they can get through their daily lives. And many of them will be literally stranded as a result of the cuts that are being voted on today. The bottom line is that although some progress, and I want to thank the board for the changes that were made in the bus routes, and I want to thank the board, in particularly Chair Walder, for slowing down the decision on Metro cards and for personally meeting with students. I think that spoke volumes about the board's interest to address this issue. But with all of that said, the bottom line is that today is a truly sad and disappointing day for the Straphangers of New York City and for public transit overall. Now, obviously, looking at the bigger picture, We all know that the MTA is facing a true structural financial problem, one that requires a long-term and short-term solution. The City Council, together with the Straphangers Campaign and the 41,000 New Yorkers who signed our petition, had presented a short-term solution that would help mitigate some of the worst cuts, a short-term solution that we hope would have built a bridge that could have helped to lead us to a longer-term solution. That was a proposal to use federal stimulus aid as well as budgeted pay-go capital funds to help support operating expenses. It's what Chicago has done, Seattle has done, Washington, D.C. has done. We've urged you to take this action. I recognize you are more than likely not going to take this action today. I believe that is a big mistake. I believe it is a mistake. In taking this mistake or committing this mistake, you will make the cuts worse. You will have not put in place one plank of a bridge that could have helped us move forward to make things easier until we got to a longer-term solution. It wasn't the answer to everything, but it would have been helpful. It is allowed under the stimulus bill. It is transparent. It is what other cities have done, and I fail to understand why the MTA is not exercising that option that the federal government has given us today. It is an option that would have helped. Now, all of that said, although I am disappointed that you're not going to take this action, obviously the fight to keep our system as strong and robust as possible continues. The struggle to prevent even more cuts moving forward continues, and we stand at the ready in the City Council to work with all of you to identify the funds on city, state, and federal levels that could create that bridge that would keep this system in as tact as possible until we get out of this recession. I thank all of you for your service, but I just want to underscore our disappointment today. There are positives today. The Metro cards are not getting eliminated. We've postponed that. Some of the worst bus route cuts have been postponed. But I just want to add two quick things. One, the accessoride cut should be also postponed. We have a pilot project moving forward soon. We shouldn't make cuts to accessoride until we see the results of that project and see what savings could be made. But lastly, I just want to say, I think all New Yorkers recognize in a time like this, there will be cuts. There will be impacts on people's lives. Things will be more difficult. But what they want to know is that every option was explored. Every stone was overturned. Everything was considered, and anything that could be done was done. The MTA cannot look New Yorkers in the eye and say that today. You had an option of using the federal stimulus money. It's a legal option. It's an option others have done. You are doing your best and you're working hard. I understand that. But you cannot, after the vote today, tell New Yorkers you exercised every legal option you had, because that is not what you will have done, and that is a true disappointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Quinn. Next speaker is Lawrence Carter Long, who will be followed by Gene Rushinoff of the Straphangers Campaign and the Honorable Oliver Coppell, New York City Council member.
Thank you for your time this morning. My name is Lawrence Carter Long. I'm the Executive Director of the Disabilities Network of New York City. That's over 70 different organizations in all 5 boroughs of New York City across the disability spectrum. I'm here to talk today to urge you to not implement these changes in the accessoride system. Why? Because nobody knows how it's going to work. From talking to people at accessoride, there is no implementation plan. Relying on the National Weather Service to make determinations is foolhardy. Anybody who watches the evening news can tell you that. It's not anything that we can guarantee. It's not anything that we can know actually works. People's physicality, their ability to get by, to go to work, to go to school, to get to the doctor, is reliant upon the accessoride system. Bear in mind that accessoride is for those users who the current transportation options do not work. People who cannot use city buses, people who cannot use the subway system. Disability is the only minority that any of us can join in an instant. Any of us step off the curb the wrong way and boom, you're in the club. Ask yourself this question. If you were to become disabled tomorrow, what would you want? What are the options that you would want to live your life independently? We've been fighting now for decades to work, to go to school, to live our lives and be contributors to society. If you make these cuts, you eliminate our options to be independent. You take away our ability to go to school and to go to work and to contribute to society. I urge you, do not do that. Do not make these changes. We were among the first to say work with livery drivers, work with the taxi system to give people more options in getting around the city the way they want to get there. But until we know that system works, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Gene Rushinoff, Straphangers Campaign, followed by the Honorable G. Oliver Coppell, and then Carol Corcoran.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board and staff. I'm Gene Rushinoff with the Straphangers Campaign. Since December, when the service cuts got resurrected overnight, people have asked me, what happened? We paid a fare hike in June, and we got a massive subsidy bill from Albany. And I tell them what I know is the facts, which is that Albany cut your budget $143 million, and that the specially dedicated tax money is coming in way below projections. But then Myers asked me, has the MTA done everything it can to protect service? And unfortunately, I have to answer that question, no. I acknowledge, as did Speaker Quinn, that you made some changes, but the bottom line is 100% of the bus cuts are going through, and 90% of the 100% of the subway cuts are going through, and 90% of the bus cuts. So it's either the glass is 1/10 full or 9/10 empty. But as I said, I cannot say you're doing everything you can. You're still refusing to use 10% of the federal stimulus money. You say that stimulus money is a one-shot. Well, that's true. That's the whole point of the stimulus money, is to get you through tough times and keep people employed. And you said it's stealing capital for operating, but it's not. It's stimulus money. It's jobs money. And other cities, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Chicago, they're doing it. Deep cuts to your service will poison the atmosphere for your future capital needs, and you have to wonder. You have to wonder why your reputation is so shredded with the public when we go through this cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rushinoff. The Honorable G. Oliver Coppell, New York City Council, followed by Carol Corcoran, and then Marty Goodman.
Good morning, members of the board. I'm chairman of the City Council Committee on Disability Rights, and I want to specifically address the cuts to the accessoride service, which are supposed to go into effect. I know you're not specifically voting on that, but they're supposed to go into effect beginning in a few weeks, according to testimony from your representative at a hearing I held yesterday on the accessoride cuts. It was clear from that hearing, number one, that there's no really worked out plan as to how to implement the idea of picking people up at their homes, taking them to a bus line or a subway line, then picking them up where they get off that bus and subway and taking them to their destination. It's going to cause confusion. It's going to cause more delay. In my opinion, it's not going to save any money. And the fact of the matter is it's going to cause a tremendous amount of anxiety and concern on the part of the disabled community. We had dozens of people in wheelchair at our hearing yesterday who are concerned that they're going to be shut into their homes because the system, it's not perfect by any means, but it's improved greatly under the management of the MTA, the accessoride system. A system that's working well should not now be attenuated when you do not even have a clear plan as to how it's going to work and save money. I urge that you tell the management to delay the implementation of these cuts until they have a clear plan, which they will never have, because there's no way to do this in a sensible manner. People who cannot get around without a door-to-door service have to maintain that. If they're not entitled to it, if they're not eligible, they should be cut off. But if they are eligible, don't take this service away from them. It's not going to save money, and it's a cruel thing to do.
Thank you, Councilman. Carol Corcoran, and then she'll be followed by Marty Goodman and John Ferretti.
Good morning. I'm here today to protest the possible loss of our X27 weekend bus service from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn to Manhattan. We feel this service is a necessity and not a luxury. The alternate means of transportation, which is the R train, is a joke and totally not acceptable. I know from personal experience the train as well as the station is filthy, unsafe, and on many occasions does not even offer service to 95th Street, which is the end of the line. Living on Shore Road, we pay high rents and mortgages and feel we are entitled to something better than this. Bay Ridge has a high population of elderly residents that are not able to use the subway. They greatly rely on weekend express bus service to get to Manhattan. If this service is discontinued, they will have no other choice than to stay at home. This attitude clearly says the MTA really doesn't care about this part of our community and our society. The residents of Bay Ridge use this service both to get to work on the weekends and for entertainment. The complete elimination of weekend service will greatly affect the lives of many in our community. As a suggestion, I would cut back on the amount of buses that are being run. This schedule is now Saturday from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., with one bus running on the half hour, and Sunday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., also running every half hour. That could easily be cut to just one every hour. Please do not take this much-needed service away from us and leave us stranded in Brooklyn on the weekends. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Corcoran, Marty Goodman, and John Ferretti.
Hello, my name is Marty Goodman. I've been a station agent for 23 years. It was my privilege to strike in 2005. Watching the wheels of injustice shut down was a demonstration of the enormous power of transit workers. It cost New York's rulers $100 million a day. You say you'll save $50 million with layoffs that include 450 station agents. Well, do the math, MTA. Mr. Walder, we can't shut you down with the very first layoff. Who are we being laid off? Transit workers are mainly African American, Latino, and immigrants, mostly youth from communities who suffer depression-level unemployment. These layoffs target these communities are, in essence, racist. This is not our crisis, and we will not pay with our jobs. Make Wall Street crooks pay for their disaster. They can afford it. Bonuses at New York's banks and security firms were up to $20 billion last year, 20% over 2008, and including our bailout money in those bonuses. Mr. Walder and the MTA Board, they ought to lay you off. Until 1981, New York City had a stock transfer tax of just 1 nickel a trade. London's is, or at least was, 10 times larger. A nickel tax on last Monday's $7.5 billion stock trades of the New York Stock Exchange would yield over $370 million. That could solve the MTA's 2010 $800 million deficit in less than 3 days. The $9 billion state deficit could be eliminated in under a month. These layoffs and transit cuts are mainly about paying the debt to banks and rich MTA bondholders. Most MTA bonds are tax-free. Who works without being taxed? Only the rich. The MTA's new Build America bonds are taxed but yield a high return. The rich cut funds to mass transit and soak up profits by purchasing bonds. A nice racket if there ever was one. Bond debt is almost half the MTA debt payment this year. The projected payment on MTA revenue bonds paid out of the fare box by working people is about $800 million. This year's MTA deficit is also about $800 million. I say cancel this debt. Every cut and layoff increases the worth of these bonds. Like the 70s crisis, the rich, in this case the MTA, is exploiting this crisis to cut service and implement layoffs.
Please summarize your comments.
We can stop the cuts cold with militant mass action. Unions can fill the streets and shut this city down. The TWU riders and community groups should be running the MTA, not the rich, politically connected, nearly all-white board that everyone sees before us.
Please
Hell no
your
to all
comments.
transit cuts. Hell no to a single layoff. Keep student passes free. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is John Ferretti. Excuse me. Next speaker, John Ferretti, followed by Councilman James Vaca.
Hell no to service cuts and layoffs. My name is John Ferretti. I am a train conductor for the MTA. I'm also a proud member of TW Local 100 and a supporter of the League for the Revolutionary Party. I'm here today to send a loud and clear message to the MTA Board, the pro-capitalist, Democratic, and Republican Party politicians who appoint you, and the parasitical banks and corporations who you all do the bidding for. The message is that if you think you are going to get away with balancing your budget deficits by laying off station agents and other transit workers, think again. If you think you can get away with a transparently racist attack on free Metro cards for New York City school students, think again. If you think you can slash transit and education and other vital public services, tightening your belts around the necks of the working class and poor of this city, think again. If you think that you can cover for these vicious attacks in the service of Wall Street with your tried and true game of divide and conquer racism, think again. The working class and poor of this city did not cause your economic crisis and budget deficits, and we will not allow you to scapegoat us for the failure of your economic system. The MTA budget deficits have been caused by an orgy of private profit-making by the banks and Wall Street. The MTA owns $29 billion in debt to these financial parasites. The MTA averaged $2 billion a year in debt service payments alone, with these payments set to balloon to over $3 billion a year by 2012. That means when you pay your fare, before any service that's delivered, before transit workers get paid, the banks must be paid first. That's the cause of the crisis. These MTA bonds are owned by some of the same banks and corporations who caused the greatest economic collapse since the Great Depression, leading to millions of workers unemployed, a massive wave of foreclosures and bankruptcies. Adding insult to injury, Wall Street, after receiving $12 trillion in bailout money from working class tax dollars, is now demanding that their bonds be paid off with massive amounts of interest from the MTA and other state-run agencies. That's why we call for canceling the public debt to the banks and corporations and demanding that the politicians fully fund the MTA and all other public services with no increased taxes or payments from the working class. To win this demand and defend ourselves against these and future attacks, the New York City working class must mobilize our power as a class to politically confront the racist anti-working class agenda of the ruling class and their state.
Please
Such a
summarize your
defense
comments.
campaign would have to raise class-wide demands that point to the real cause of the economic crisis, the parasitic interest of the ruling class. No one group of workers can successfully defeat the wholesale attacks being made on our class. That's why we call for TW Local 100 to demand that the New York City Central Labor Council mobilize all of New York City's unions in a massive series of demonstrations to defeat the MTA's planned service cuts, fare increases, and layoffs. These demonstrations must demand a massive program of public works to meet the needs of the working class and poor.
Please conclude your comments.
Such a series of massive demonstrations putting forward these and other class-wide demands would send a clear message to the banks and the financial institutions that if they think the working class will pay the bill for their orgy of profits, they better think again. Hell no to layoffs. Not one job lost to save Wall Street's profits. Hell no to service cuts and fare increases.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is the Honorable James Vaca. Will be followed by Christine Williams.
Hello. Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the board, and I realize that today's vote is a difficult vote. I realize that the MTA has a fiscal situation that's upsetting to us all. I do think that Speaker Quinn and the City Council have outlined a plan that represents a possible blueprint for all of you to explore. That plan is important because, in my view, should this go through today, we have to recognize that it may begin a process over the next 2 to 3 years where our mass transit system will no longer represent mass transit. The reality of the situation is that we could be in a transportation abyss should these deficits not be addressed. The city and the state and the federal government and the MTA and labor have to come to the table in the days ahead, or else should the cuts and all the fare increases and all the toll increases that we face down the line, according to possibilities raised by the MTA, should those things come about, the strap hanger, the motorist, all of us will be paying more and more and getting less and less, and the worst will be what is left to come. You know, in Albany last year, they raised taxes. When they raised taxes, they told us that those taxes would be dedicated to the MTA, would be dedicated to avert terrible, terrible cuts. But what they did with that money is that they took the money away from the MTA and put it into the general fund of the state of New York. Well, the taxpayer had the wool pulled over their eyes because we thought they were dedicated taxes for mass transit. This basically has become nothing more than another lottery sham. For people in this city who still think the lottery money went to education, we know differently. Well, the lottery money may not have gone to education, but what people thought was going to the MTA ended up somewhere and nobody knows where. That money has to be restored because the people were told that that's where it was going. We know that there's a fiscal crisis in this state, but there's something called honesty and transparency. To have our services cut, and to have us now face 3 years of continuing cuts, understand where the strap hanger is coming from. Those of us who use public transportation, who use our cars and use our bridges, we face the prospect of paying $6.50 to going from one borough to another. That's outrageous. We ask you to look at the program the council has put forth. We want to work with the MTA where we can. We know that you've worked hard. You've had public hearings. We put forth a plan that represents the only blueprint that has been put forth. Use that as a guide. Let's try to get the jobs programs, the jobs bills in Washington to assist us. Let's go to Albany and tell them to fulfill their word to the people of the state of New York. We in the city council are willing to play a role. We're willing to come to the table with you. But to go ahead with these cuts at this point, I think begins the process of a transportation abyss for our city. I don't want to go there.
Thank you, Councilman. The next speaker is Christine Williams, followed by the Honorable Marty Goldman, Senator. Christine Williams.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, riding public. My name is Christine Williams, and yes, I am a station agent for the New York City Transit System. Thank you. Although my job is in jeopardy, I'm not here to speak for myself. I'm here speaking on behalf of the riding public and the New York City schools, school children. Again, the riders of New York will suffer because of the hands of the MTA's mismanagement and wasteful spending. Again, the working class, hard-working families will suffer from from the board here who don't even ride the trains. We are going to be the ones that suffer of the decisions that's going to go down today. The MTA is definitely going the wrong way by cutting the eyes and ears of the system. This is the largest system in the world. We are the frontline. Stations agents are the front line of the largest transit system in the world. Already, we have bands of swipers. We call them swipers. These people go around with bogus Metro cards. Here's an article in the paper. A 15-year-old kid got robbed, took his money and his iPod. This is just the beginning. If these booths go through with closing, it's going to be chaos underground. Also, you also want to cut the eyes and the ears and replace them with cameras. There's another article. The cameras don't even work. Okay, all I have to say, I'm going to sum up. And also I want to bring up, not only the cameras don't work, the MVM machines. I've gone to stations where there are 4 MVM machines, all say no bills. You have tourists totally confused. They don't know who to turn to or where to go. But there are people out there that will help them. The swipers will help them. And they will sell, they are already doing it. They're selling them bogus cards. Okay, I would like to sum up everything. Just the MTA is definitely going the wrong way if you go through with these cuts today. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Senator Martin Connor, to be followed by Sharon Allen.
Marty Connor is no longer with us. This is Senator Marty Golden from South Brooklyn, New York. Good afternoon. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Board. These reductions will force our tax base out of the city of New York. People live here where they live because they access good jobs, good services, and live in a safe environment and have extraordinary transportation services which make their lives livable. These cuts will make traveling to work and traveling for many other reasons much more difficult, frustrating, and somewhat impossible. I'm not one of those guys, as I heard some of our newspapers, big giveaways in the year 2000. I didn't do that. I wasn't in the Senate in 2000. I'm one of those guys that believe we have to do freezes on jobs. We have to freeze salaries. We have to cut services. And yes, and if you were to ask some of the people that are in this room and across this great city, they would even take a minimal increase to be able to keep the services that they believe they need to be able to get to and from their place of employment or their businesses. I was one of those guys that was for the congestion pricing. I believe the congestion pricing would have done the right thing and would have added services to our community. I was against the payroll tax, and I am still against that payroll tax because it was wrong. And we lied to the people. We told those people across this great city that we wouldn't cut these services if we put that payroll tax into effect. And we did. And I was right about being against that payroll tax. You know what? They have a resolution up in the Senate right now, on the Senate side. You know what they're doing? A tax credit for the counties that are outside the city of New York, which means those businesses, if passed, will not pay or pay a minimal amount of money for that payroll tax. Who's going to pay for it? The city of New York. The employers here will pay the bulk. What will they do? They will wind up laying people off, not hiring people, and that will cause the economy to stagnate for a number of years. Fare beaters. I'm going to tell you guys, as a former New York City police officer, you jump a turnstile, we are on top of you. We cuff you, we summons you, we run your name through the system, you got a warrant, we put you in, right? On a bus, I'll go with any one of you, on any bus line you want to go on. And you would have a stroke to find out how many people don't pay. And that we don't have any type of services going after those people to make sure that they pay for those services. We're not losing a couple of $100,000. We're losing to the tune of millions and millions of dollars on those fare beaters on our buses each and every day. Does the public know that? Have we have any plan at all to go after the fare beaters on the bus? We should, ladies and gentlemen. We should. I heard about federal funding. There is a stimulus. What does the word stimulus mean? It means to stimulate the economy and put jobs and to build the economy. You can use 10% of that if you choose to do so for operating dollars. We should take a look at that and see if we can use that 10% operating so that we can do what stimulus is supposed to do, stimulate the economy. Jobs, businesses. Over 1,000 businesses on that 3rd Avenue line alone. Think about how many jobs we are going to lose. Think about it. 1,000 businesses on that one line, and you cleaned it out. Over in Garrison Beach, no line to get out of that at night. None whatsoever. They are trapped in their homes, cannot get out of that community at night. I take a look at this, and it's very, very sad. I've heard somebody about the express buses. People moving to a community because of what? Public safety, transportation, education. You change that dynamic, they move out of a community. Where do they go? They're not going to Staten Island. They're not going to Queens. They're going to New Jersey. We're losing a tax base that we're trying to keep. The tax base that pays that express bus, those are higher tax earners. Those people pay serious taxes into our economy, and there will be serious job losses because of it. We can't allow that to happen. What we did to the 3rd Avenue bus, we took the 3rd Avenue bus and we put this phony loop together called the B70. The B70 is one of the few lines that actually increased in business over the past few years by 26%. And what we did is we changed the line completely. What we did is we made a 2-mile loop. So that means a senior, of which I have the highest quantity of seniors in the entire state of New York, live in Brooklyn and in Queens, would have to get on at 75th Street and 3rd Avenue. It would take them an hour to get to 55th Street. They'd have to go up this loop to 5th Avenue to take a 5th Avenue bus to go to 58th Street to take another bus down to Lutheran Medical Hospital. Ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't work. You got to take a look at some of these cuts. You got to be serious. I know we have a dynamic. This is the worst economic times that we've seen in our lifetime. I was a laid-off cop in 1974 and 1975. I know when we get up to a tough times. We're there again, ladies and gentlemen. We got to make some tough decisions, but we got to make wise decisions. There's a lot of money out there, and we got to go after it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for all of you that came from our communities to testify today. Thank you.
And thank you, Senator Golden.
Thank you. That was very good. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sharon Allen, to be followed by Derek Echeverria, and then the Honorable Adonis Rodriguez, New York City Council.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am a station agent for 6 years, so I am one of those people that received the layoff notice. My question is to Mr. Walden. I came here to speak directly to you, and what my question is can you please explain to me? I'm a single mother with 2 children, one in college and one in Catholic school, so that means I'm overwhelmed. So I want to know, why do you feel that it's better for me to sit home and collect unemployment for 2 years instead of me going to work and be the ears and the eyes of transit in a job that I love? I don't understand this. I can't comprehend this. How do you feel that you're not going to use this capital money that it's legal by law for you to use? Other states have done it. So if you can please explain to me, what is this money going for? Why are you just holding it? Is it collecting interest in some other fund? We need to stay employed. I need my job. I love my job. I have a family support. There's no other way for me to do this. I don't have a degree in anything else. I look at you wonderful, lovely-looking people here, and I think, oh, my God, these people cannot relate to me. They have no idea the pain that I feel of losing my job. You look lovely. You guys are not worried about anything. You have it made, it appears to me. Why don't one of you guys take a pay cut and keep some of us employed? I need to work. I love my job. So please, 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 Mr. Walden, use that 10%. It's legal. You can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Echeverria, followed by the Honorable Echeverria.
Yes, good morning.
Yes.
My name is Derek Echeverria. I'm the Division Chair of Stations. I represent the 3,400 station agents and the 600 you intend to lay off. You're my eyes and ears. See something, say something. A layer of security. That is in your report to Homeland Security, that you're removing these agents. You're removing one of the layers. Tokyo, Madrid, London, the cameras don't work. We need to practice a preventive form of medicine, security. I was at a graduation ceremony for some cleaners, and the MTA's representation was, everything is wonderful. Welcome to the company. You have room for advancement. Well, where are the 600 clerks advancing to? Where are they going? The lies just continue to go on and on. Why? 2 Broadway, that massive transit building, there's a security guard on every floor. Who's coming to get you? There are no security. We are the eyes and ears. That's not my statement. That's yours. But, like I said, we need to work together to find some kind of resolve these issues. And bean counting doesn't work. You say ridership is down. How would you know if the agents aren't there to count them? Thank you.
Thank you. The Honorable Adonis Rodriguez. New York City Council member, followed by Joseph Gifford and Sabrina Greenwood.
Thank you, board members and everyone present at this hearing. I'm here not as a city council, but as a teacher, as a New Yorker, as someone that represents a district where most of the people has an income of less than $30,000 a year. Less than $30,000 a year. That's the income that my constituents have in Washington Heights, Marble Hill, and Inwood. But that's the income that not only my constituency has, that's the income that a lot of people have in New York City. And I believe that we have so many people struggling at this moment. And I understand that we are in an economic crisis. And I believe that the MTAs have to balance the deficit. But I believe that we also have to respect New Yorkers. And I believe that New Yorkers, they participate in all those hearings that you organize. And close to 100% who participate in those hearings, they say we are against cut. And especially we are against eliminating a student metro card. And I believe that right now, what you're going to be deciding today, and most likely you're going to be voting for, is eliminating many services, postponing the elimination of student metro card, and I believe that you should not be voting on postponing. I believe that you should take the proposal of eliminating a student metro card forever. I believe that the city, the state, everyone should share responsibility. I believe that it's not only the MTA responsible to guarantee a free student metro card, but I believe that we have to call for a immediate meeting where the mayor, the speaker, anyone who has something to say about the student metro card should participate. Estamos aquí porque creemos que los neoyorquinos hablaron en las audiencias y los neoyorquinos dijeron no a los recortes que se están presentando hoy y específicamente a la eliminación de la tarjeta de transportación para los estudiantes. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Councilman. Joseph Gifford, followed by Sabrina Greenwood and Murray Bowden. Joseph Gifford, are you here? If not, we'll call your name later. Sabrina Greenwood. And then Murray Bowden.
Good morning. My name is Sabrina Greenwood. I'm a station agent for about 5 years. I'm also represented by Local 100. I am one of the 600 station agents that will be laid off May 7th. I'm the mother of 4. Everybody said, oh, we make too much money. I make $55,000 a year. I send my 19-year-old daughter to college, and I have 3 other children to support. $55,000 is not enough to take care of a family of 5. I don't want to apply for welfare. I don't want Medicaid. I don't want food stamps. I would like to come to work. They say, all you do is sell Metro cards. I do more than sell Metro cards every day. I save lives. If I'm at a station, and every day, Mr. Weldon knows he can get the report from the EBCS system. That's our emergency system. That's how we report if something happens on the train station. Kids come through, they run straight into the train station. Mother is there frantic, standing before me. What am I supposed to do? How do I get my baby back? I call the police, I press that button, they're there. I saved the child's life. It was on 149th Street on the 6th line. We caught that 5-year-old child on 125th Street. If I was not there, and she's frantic, what would she have done? He could have been raped, he could have been mugged, he could have been killed. Anybody could have took him off that train. If station agents are not there, like the lady said before me, we are the eyes of the ears. Those cameras do not work, our intercom systems do not work. The system is horrible. Without us, it will be what? I would be afraid to ride the trains. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Murray Bowden, to be followed by Joseph Gifford. Mr. Bowden.
Hi, my name is Samantha, and I'm here to talk about the MTA as they lay off people that work at the station. So what I think we should do is there should be a question button. How the question button works, for example, if someone doesn't know how to get somewhere or take which train, they just press the question button and connect with a live person who will give them the information they need. Thank you and enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Good morning. This is the legacy. Come here. This is who we're leaving our legacy to. What you do now is a design for her generation. Her generation thinks differently than ours. An example is the train whistles, which blow and were needed 100 years ago, but not needed today. That kind of thinking has to change. The chairman has found new ways of thinking about things which many of you can't accept. This is not 100 years ago. The system has to change. There has to be new ways of doing things. And yes, some people will find their jobs changed. It cannot exist the way it always has. Samantha, this gentleman sitting here made an appointment with me 14 months ago to meet and talk about the Metro North trains. Here it is 14 months later, and he can't meet with me because he's afraid that he will have to change. Now, until these people who run the system begin to understand that people like you have ideas and they have to listen to us, we have a problem. All of these people have legitimate, they don't want to lose their jobs, but along the line there is going to be some change. And unless we leave a better system for you, we have a problem. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you both.
This way.
Next speaker, Joseph Gifford, then David Gilchrist, Venetia Portlet, and then Council Member Williams.
I don't have anything written down at this time, so I'm going to ad-lib. I'd like to talk about station agents being the eyes and the ears of the New York City Transit Authority. For example, approximately 7 years ago, about 5:30 in the morning at Rockaway Avenue on the C train, the I&D line, a man was stabbed 7 times in the face. There were the regular customers there, but no one dialed 911, no one tried to intervene, and no one tried to go for help. Because there was 2 of us in the booth, one of us was immediately able to hit the EBCS, and the other was able to go assist the customer once the perpetrator left the station. Now, one of those customers testified in court. I did. The customer who was hurt wasn't able to identify the perp. I did. The end result was 25 to life. That was being the eyes and the ears of New York City Transit. Sometimes customers will witness things, but they won't be willing to go to court, but they will convey information to station agents because they're familiar with them. I have a question, Mr. Walden. If and when students do not receive free transportations, and our police officers, are they going to allow them through the gate, or are they going to give them a summons? And once they get multiple summons, how does that result in them getting jobs in the future? I'd like to know about that. My position is not threatened now, but I'm sure sometime down the line it will be. So I'm here to support those who are threatened immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. David Gilchrist, Venetia Portlet.
Good morning. I'm the Executive Director of Project Find, a not-for-profit organization that provides housing and services to older New Yorkers since 1969. Our programs include nearly 600 units of government-assisted housing and 5 senior centers that serve over 5,000 people annually. I'll direct my comments to the proposed cuts to the Accessoride program. Accessoride is a lifeline to the numerous frail elderly tenants living in our buildings or coming to our centers. afflicted with medical conditions that compromise their mobility, the accessorized service enables these individuals to retain their independence. The MTA budget seeks to generate $24 million in savings by reducing the number of persons who use this service. The MTA has provided an outline of some of the mechanisms and criteria we use to reduce service utilization, but the details remain opaque. From what has been made public, it's clear the MTA will engage in a much more active screening process, reviewing ride requests on a case-by-case basis in combination with the employment of a higher or more selective threshold for program eligibility. The devil is in the details, with a tremendous amount of responsibility being foisted upon the shoulders of the MTA employees who process the literally hundreds of thousands of service requests. My fear is that the animating spirit behind these decisions will inevitably shift from service provision to service denial. Market changes in eligibility criteria, door-to-door service privileges, or when someone can even avail themselves to a feeder service will inevitably confuse riders and will lead many of them to forego this service completely. The MTA is right to be looking at ways to deliver these services more efficiently. The possible use of vouchers for car services is an excellent concept that could well prove to be a more flexible and less expensive alternative. Unfortunately, this alternative is only in its beginning trial stages. I do not envy your position and the difficult decisions you are all faced with. The MTA oversees a vast transportation infrastructure that's so intertwined with the quality of life of our region as to be inseparable from it.
Please summarize your comments, if you would.
As such, these proposed cuts must be measured against their social consequences of their implementation. I ask for the sake of our school children, the elderly, disabled, fellow Straphangers, that you look past this terrible budget cycle and find a way to keep these services flowing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Onisha Portlet, followed by the Honorable Jermaine D. Williams, member of the New York City Council, and then Burroughs Fatih.
Good morning. My name is Onisha Portlet. I'm a Bronx bus operator, also director of the Women's Committee of TWU, Local 100. Normally I speak from my heart. Today I wrote from my heart. I know I'm on a time point. I stand before you feeling hurt, confused, and bamboozled. I was truly under the impression and believed that Mr. Walden and the MTA board members were working hard and diligently on a budget to avoid the cuts on student Metro cards, services, and layoffs, to only find out that you were all working hard consistently and persistently to avoid giving yourself and your staff members a 10% pay cut in their already gracious, extensive salaries. Please turn the mic back up so everyone could hear me. These cuts will create a new modern-day depression that will affect every person within and around New York City. Here's a few suggestions to avoid these crises from taking place. As far as layoffs go, open a decent retirement window. By opening the retirement window, you will be able to avoid layoffs and produce jobs to help the economy and not burden it. As far as the student Metro cards go, just let them ride for free. As far as the service cuts go, that can also be avoided as well by using the stimulus aid as the other states already done. Before I'm going to end my speech, I'm going to cut it short. My father, before he passed away, he used to always tell me coming up, keep it simple, stupid. So I pass that phrase on to you, in no disrespect. Good day.
Thank you. Councilman Williams, be followed by Burroughs Fatih.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Board, and the writing public. First, I want to say, actually, I want to give credit where credit is due. So I want to say thank you for listening to so many of us who are asking that you don't cut the student metro cards, and you took some of the other draconian cuts off the table. So I want to say thank you for that. I wish other committees like the PEP and the Rent Guidelines Board would listen as well. But I also need to say we also need you to listen just a little bit more, because there's a lot more that needs to be done. And I know a few years back people said that the TWU held the city hostage when they did what they felt they needed to do. And I feel like the MTA holds the city hostage every time they meet, because there's not much that the public can do once you've made these decisions, and it affects so many of us. And as a council member, I like to stand for those who are taken advantage of wherever possible. And I feel there's many of us who are taken advantage of now. The transit system, as I said so much, is a necessity. We have to stop treating it as something that we can just play with. Everyone agrees that the transit system, without it, the city will not be able to run. The people need the transit system. They need it to be affordable. It has to be affordable, or else the city will crumble. So New York City and the residents and the people who take the transit system, like me, for most of my 33 years, are taken advantage of every time we raise fees, taken more advantage of every time you raise fee and changes aren't made, taken more advantage of when you raise fees and cut services. It just makes no sense. Station agents are taken advantage of because we want to take away their jobs. And people are talking about all the horrendous things that they have to encounter in terms of crimes and things of that nature. Just easily, I want my questions answered when I go to the train. Where can I go? What train can I take? Those are simple questions that we need answered to be able to use the train properly. Last and most, because they need it most, are disabled citizens and neighbors. Need the transit system to operate in a way that works for me. I can go on any system and go and use the train however I need to. The people who need accessoride, who need the trains, can't do that. So what I'm strongly urging is the MTA get back on track by utilizing $121 million in available federal stimulus funds, with $50 million in operating funds that is budgeted to pay capital projects as a means of rehabbing our damaged transit system. We need to be leaders now. We need to adjust priorities. The priorities now are not capital. The priorities now are keeping the transit system running, keeping people in their jobs, and making sure that all the residents have access to ride the transit system. And the MTA Board, please don't hold us hostage anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Maurice Jenkins, followed by Veronica Vanderpool and Felicia Fields.
Good morning, Chairman Walder, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maurice Jenkins. I'm first Vice President of Local 375 of District Council 37. Of course, my speech here, or statement, is not directly related to the so many speakers who spoke before me. I'm here to remind the board of its contractual obligation regarding the wage increases for more than 1,500 represented employees of in New York City Transit. District Council 37 finalized its contractual negotiation with the city more than 2 years ago, and historically New York City Transit has honored that contract. Unfortunately, for more than 12 months, New York City Transit has failed to deliver its obligation for more than 1,500 employees, engineers and architects and members of District Council 37 employees' wage increases. Of course, I'm here also to echo my members' frustration and agitation in this situation, and I strongly recommend and encourage the board to pass the budget on this issue and move forward, because I sincerely believe that high morale of employees is going to make the MTA stronger and also increase the productivity. And thank you very much. And at the end, I should make the statement that I strongly support all of the speakers who spoke before me on the issue. And don't cut the services. Thank you.
Thank you. Veronica Vanderpool, followed by Felicia Fields and Maurice Jenkins.
Good morning, Chairman Walder and members of the MTA Board. My name is Veronica Vanterpool, and I'm the Associate Director of Tri-State Transportation Campaign. Today, it appears inevitable that transit riders will face a poorer quality system than we have today. There will be fewer bus routes, less frequent train service, less station agents to maintain the system. Crime might increase. It is the worst package of cost-saving measures seen in over a generation of users. This is why we call on the MTA to use $90 million in federal stimulus funds to avert this outcome. $90 million will restore nearly all of the service cuts across the entire system. It would send a powerful message that the agency is doing everything that it can to lessen the pain for New York City Transit, Long Island Bus, Access-A-Ride, and Able-Ride. The headline could read, MTA pained by service cuts, changes mind on stimulus funds. Think how greatly that would improve the public's and politicians' perception of the MTA. Historically, the MTA has opposed federal operating aid for fear that it would siphon the overall pot of capital funds to rebuild and expand the system. That would indeed be a disaster. The system we have and we would want to see in the future requires billions of dollars. As it is, the proposed $28 billion capital program has a $10 billion hole. More than two-thirds of it is to bring the system to a state of good repair. That means a lot of good stuff, like station rehabs and improved technology, aren't going to happen. But the MTA has to be a leader in D.C. fighting for a bigger pot of transit money overall that helps fund both capital and operating budgets. With the financial status quo, transit crises will never go away. If the pot grows, there can be more money to both build and expand the system and maintain it. The MTA is the most powerful transit agency in the country. Your voice and position can guide policy. With increased transit use as a key goal in climate, energy security, and economic discussions, you have a captive audience to make the case for greater federal transit funding overall. Finally, we need greater attention to transit issues from city and state elected officials on a consistent basis, not just when things get bad. We need more real, long-term solutions that are sustainable and balanced, and less finger-pointing for a situation many politicians help to create. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Felicia Fields, followed by Maurice Jenkins, Irene Bergson, and then George Spitz.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I come to you as a mother of 5 kids, 2 of whom have disabilities. I'm also an employee of MTA. I'm employed as a station agent. I'm one of the station agents that can very well be laid off. I'm here as a representative of my co-workers, which is my fellow station agents, my union brothers and sisters at TWU Local 100, and as well as my family. Okay, in the recent year, in the last year, I would say, my family has had to deal with 2 deaths. That's the death of my mother and my sister, which was 4 months apart. If I get laid off, guess what? That's going to be another death my family will have to cope with. Okay? If my kids' bus passes are cut, that's going to be another death. That's a total of 5 deaths. How much is one family is supposed to suffer? I'm here to plead with you. I'm not angry. I do know decisions need to be made. I'm here to plead with you not to lay off station agents. I don't believe that that's the answer, because we have to be there for our customers. Okay? Not to cut student bus passes. Kids, they're going to school. They have a right to an education. Don't take that away. We have to give them the initiative to go to school, and that's where we can give them that initiative. And don't reduce the train. So I know you got to do what you got to do, but I think there's a little way to go around it. All of these things, these cuts, they will not affect one of us, but all of us. Station agents, we're always undermined. We're always responsible. We are, in fact, responsible for so much. We have to ensure that our riding public get to and from their destination safely, as well as report any unusual occurrences. If you take away the station agents, there's a possibility that our riding public won't be able to make it to their destinations safely. Instead of saving money by laying on station agents, guess what? You're going to be spending more money in lawsuits, because if a customer gets hurt, I'm telling you, they're coming back with lawyers. Think about it. Okay?
Please summarize your
And it's not
comments.
worth them being jeopardized. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Maurice Jenkins is our next speaker. Maurice Jenkins, followed by Irene Bergson, George Spitz, and Tony Murphy.
Good morning, Mr. Walder. How are you today? I hope you're feeling better than my co-workers. My name is Maurice Jenkins, and I'm the Vice President of Station Agents in Local 100. I had a written, prepared statement that I was going to speak on today, but apparently you don't seem to listen, so let's just do something else for a change. Station agents in the audience, please stand. Let Mr. Walder see you. Now, I need to... The mic is off. Okay. I need to ask a question of each and every one of you. Each and every one of you, have you ever taken part in saving a person's life or actually saved a person's life? If that's ever happened, raise your hand. Now, Mr. Walder, I would ask you, you have to put value on certain aspects of life. Look at these people. They represent this city. They're as diverse as any culture that occupies this city. You came here from London. You call yourself a New Yorker. I think you need to act like a New Yorker. The first thing that a New Yorker would consider is the people of the city. This rich, diverse city that we live in, the greatest city in the world, needs to be safe. We've told you time and time again, layers of security that must be addressed. Station agents are the eyes and ears. They're the foundation, the basis of those layers. If you take away the basis of those layers, then the security will ultimately crumble. I need you not to just listen, but to see. 50 lives were lost in London. 50. Can you hear the people crying at the funerals? Do you see the tears of the mothers, of the sons, of the fathers of those 50 who perished? What price do you put on those lives? I ask you again, because I guess the first time you didn't hear me. Station agents wear many hats. I'm a station agent of 28 years. This is one hat. But the ultimate hat that we wear is a halo.
Thank you. Next speaker, Irene Bergson, then George Spitz, Tony Murphy, and Brian Collingsworth.
Oh my gosh, I am so impressed by these speakers. I'm a retired teacher. Our educational system must have done something right to hear these voices. They're wonderful. I guess mine is minor, but I'm trying to save a neighborhood, Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. I live there. As I said, I'm a retired art teacher and an artist, and I love Brooklyn. It's a refuge from Manhattan, frankly. But there's only one museum in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Museum. It's a great museum. But professionally, I have to go to Manhattan for the galleries and the museums. I'm a tourist there, I guess, as many tourists come to Brooklyn, Bay Ridge, stay with friends, and have to get into Manhattan. But I'm not here just to represent myself. I've traveled the buses. I go there to Manhattan every day, and I've collected over 500 signatures in a few weeks. And I'm here to speak for the people who couldn't get here, the workers who travel those buses. I'm retired. I can go anytime. But it's the workers who go into the city who need to leave Brooklyn to get in and work. I speak for Dennis, who lives on Shore Road. He's wondering, why is he paying an MTA tax on an independent, self-employed contractor when he spends $200 a month to ride the bus? Why is he paying those taxes? Linda Miller, who says if they get rid of the 37 and they add 27, they're going to have to go through the area where they're building the World Trade Center. It's now 2 lanes. It means that people who have to get to Upper Manhattan are going to have to get there a half an hour later. It's going to make a huge congestion at the World Trade Center. I speak for Jeff. He signed his leases up in August in Bay Ridge, and he moved from Long Island. And one reason he moved there was because of the express bus route. So he'll move. We'll lose him. Carol Clementi, she said more buses would have to be added. If we lose the 37, we'd have to add more 27 buses. Does that make any sense? You're adding more buses. Why don't they just put a 27 on the 37
If you would
bus?
please conclude your remarks.
Yes. Ms. Fishman, I'm just speaking for 500 people who had to go to work today, who would have been here to speak to you, but they had to travel the buses, and and they travel the buses because the subways in Bay Ridge is like a dead-end road. From Shore Road, you can't get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. George Spitz, and Tony Murphy, Brian Collingsworth, and Richard Barr, and Matthew Shotkin.
Be sure and distribute this, because I'm making charges of bias and corruption, not against the MTA, but against 2 firms involved in the 2nd Avenue subway. And I've got the links. These are not for them. 2 major companies are involved in 2nd Avenue subway project, are involved in questionable practices, including corruption and bias. The Swedish firm Skanska, which announced in Stockholm that it has been contracted to manage and carry out construction of a new 2nd Avenue subway on Manhattan East Side, admitted having paid bribes to Argentinian officials for building routes, building part of 2 gas pipelines, and has been convicted of price fixing in Sweden. Skanska also withdrew from bidding in the construction of a new city hall in Olympia, Washington, after declining to sign an affidavit pledging they would not discriminate against domestic partnerships. Also, several major construction companies were ordered to pay multi-million dollars in kroner for high price fixing in Stockholm District Court. One of them was Skanska. They had to, and now that's Skanska. Now, Dimjam Harris did the design contract, even though that's Elliott Sanders' own firm, even though the MTA has personnel that could have done it. They were heavily involved in the Big Dig project and were found guilty by and forced to pay, along with Parsons Brinckerhoff and other contractors, for all the Ostover runs and including one death of the Big Dig in Boston. Now,
Please
Mr.
summarize your
Seabrook, I'm
comments,
pointing
Mr.
out to
Spitz.
you've got a lot of transit workers here. They're not represented on the board. You're the laborman. Can you possibly continue to support this corrupt 2nd Avenue project, which is paying, and if they use light rail instead of the subway in 2nd Avenue, it would save $3 billion, and they wouldn't need to lay off transit workers. They wouldn't need to raise fares. They wouldn't need to cut services.
Please conclude your remarks, Mr. Spitz.
My friend, Mr. Finelli, told me, well, the previous regime signed these contracts, but they signed contracts with corrupt firms, and I've documented it. There's backup in I've backed up in links to every one of my charges. So thank you very much. Please consider not forcing the workers in the TWU, the riders, to pay for a corrupt contractor, Skanska, and Dimjam Harris. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Tony Murphy, then Brian Collingsworth, Richard Barr, and Matthew Shotkin and Christine Diamond.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Bail Out the People movement. Our slogan is bail out the people, not the banks. We're in total support of the transit workers today, no matter what gets decided here. It's not the transit workers who are overpaid. If you want to find someone who's overpaid, you might want to look at Jay Walder, who gets a a yearly salary of $350,000. He's got a housing allowance. His housing is paid for. He's got a $22,000 retirement fund. This chairman who sits at the head of the MTA, this is the MTA referred to in the media as the cash-strapped MTA. Does this board look cash-strapped to you? Of course it's not. Of course it's not. They have they're sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that they funnel to the Hole and Second Avenue subway, no-bid contracts, their cronies on Wall Street, real estate developers, and of course, as has been mentioned before, debt service. Hundreds of millions of dollars a month, a couple of $1 billion a year go to paying interest on loans that were taken out long ago. That's hundreds of millions of dollars that go to the banks for doing nothing. Those banks don't need this money. We found out the minute that they were bailed out by Wall Street that the money is there. The question is it going to keep going to the rich or is it going to go to the people? And I would just like to say that I was at the Manhattan hearing where the students were able to push for a meeting with Walder. He tried to avoid it. But there were people demonstrating outside. There were students demonstrating, hundreds of students. There were hundreds of transit workers outside. The MTA got the police to keep everybody outside.
Please summarize your comments.
But even with that, the students pushed. A student got up at the microphone and bravely confronted the chairman and said, "We demand a meeting with you." They got the meeting, and they were able to postpone the cuts and the decision about the Metro cards.
Please conclude your remarks, if you will.
I'm being asked to conclude my remarks. I would like to say that how it's obvious when you look at the bailout that there's enough money to resolve this problem like that. When you look at the bailouts, the billions of dollars there, then the bonuses that were given as a result of that, this $800 million that the MTA is claiming is forcing them to make these cuts could be taken care of like that. And people know this in their guts. They support the transit workers. They supported them when they went out on strike in 2005. No matter how much they were attacked by the media, no matter how they were attacked by Bloomberg, the billionaire Bloomberg, the 23rd richest man in the world.
We need to move on to the next speaker, please.
The Bloomberg referred to the transit workers as thugs. This is a mayor who made homeless people pay rent. He's the thug.
Thank you for your comments.
I'm going to conclude by saying I was asked earlier by a Channel 7 reporter, how would we resolve the situation? Where's the money going to come from? There's lots of things you could do. We're paying taxes right now. The interest payments that go to the banks can be taxed. Why should we be the only people who get taxed? That's income for the banks. It's April 15th is coming up. We shouldn't be the only people who get taxed. There's lots of ways that this can be resolved, and people know this. And the point, what I would like to conclude with is that if you're picking a fight with the transit workers, you're picking a fight with the people of New York City.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Because they know in their guts that the transit workers fight. They fight. If they make the money that they make is $50,000 a year at most, that's not too much. They know that the transit workers are willing to fight, and the people of New York know that in order to confront these kinds of cuts, that's what's needed to be done is a fight. And you have picked a fight with the entire city, and we're going to prevail.
The next speaker is Brian Collingsworth, then Richard Barr, Matthew Shotkin, Christine Diamond, Elizabeth Bender, and then the last speaker is a representative for Council Member Levin.
Hi, good morning. My name is Brian Collinsworth. I'm with the Working Families Party. We've been fighting very hard on the issue of trying to stop these cuts, stop fare hikes, especially the student Metro cards. We've been working with the really amazing students who have organized so much of this just all on their own. And we do want to thank Chairman Walder for meeting with them and making progress there. Today, I just want to read 10 of the 1,000 comments we've received from supporters of the Working Families Party in the last 24 hours before this meeting. And I'll just do 10 that are pretty much representative of what people are saying. Cap McHugh, each year the price of public transportation goes up, and for what? Service cuts. There must be a better way to reformulate how we're going to keep our public transportation system accessible and convenient for the entire city. Otherwise, it's not much of a public transportation system. Sean Crespo, our city lives and breathes because of the subway. Cut that back and everything else will begin to die. Education, the local economy, tourism, etc. This is not any other city, this is New York City. Don't turn us into a second-tier destination. Jennifer Hirsch, great cities need great transit. Please don't make these cuts. Taking the elevator up from the platform at 168th Street is already the low point of my day, every day. Don't make it worse. Weibin Wang, public transit is essential to New York, its people, and its economy. Don't cut service or raise fares when people are out of work and need the service most. Rachel Rashlin, we can't afford any more cuts. Demand more funds from the state and use the federal stimulus money to maintain service. Thea Martinez, put pressure on the city and state to do the right thing. Do not cut vital services to our hardworking tax-paying citizens. We deserve a fair shake and a piece of the pie. Jeremy Cherson, how are we to reconcile your steep fare hikes with poor service? It's insane, and these kind of policy maneuvers are exactly what creates hostility, resentment, and disapproval.
Please summarize your comments.
Sure. I'll do two more then. Jeff Dunman, how can you even consider cutting public transportation in New York City? How is this even on the table? What is wrong with you? All of those sentences followed by a question mark and 2 exclamation points. And finally, Letitia Alanis, transit experts and millions of New Yorkers know there is a better way to make the MTA sustainable than putting in effect cuts to our buses and subways. We expect you to do the right thing. I think that pretty much sums it up. Thank you very much.
Okay. Our next speaker, Richard Barr, Matthew Shotkin, Christine Diamond, Elizabeth Bender.
Good morning. My name is Richard Barr, and the MTA is facing a deficit, and the solutions you're choosing are cuts in station and transit personnel, and also in services that many hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers depend on. And I would suggest that rather than either of those, you'd be looking elsewhere, and I'll just mention 3 areas. 1, personnel. If the MTA is facing this kind of deficit, then you cannot afford the number of executive and administrative staff you have. You've got to make cuts there, and you can't afford the salaries that they're making. I think you've got to make cuts there as well. Number 2, the yards. I read that related companies, a very politically connected developer which got the development rights to Hudson Yards, hasn't even come forward with a down payment yet. If they're not going to put up, then I suggest you remove them as the developer, renegotiate, get somebody who'll pay you up front now when you need the money. And as far as Atlantic Yards, you've got another politically connected developer addicted to public subsidy who got that contract even though someone else bid about $100 million more. Why was he given it for $100 million less than someone else was willing to give you? And then he negotiated it down even further. Renegotiate it and get the kind of money out of him that you ought to be. And lastly, real estate. You own expensive buildings. I don't think you can afford them. The one at 2 Broadway, the cost overruns on the renovations were such that the contractor was willing to pay Al D'Amato $500,000 for one phone call to get the MTA to approve those overruns, when the chairman then was D'Amato's former campaign chairman, Peter Calico. Sell that building. Sell any other expensive building that you have, because you can't afford to be in them. You've got a building in Brooklyn. If that's not enough, then rent inexpensive space somewhere so you can house your whole operation, but get the money for expensive buildings that you own and can no longer afford. Thank you.
Matthew Shotkin is our next speaker. And
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and welcome back to the board table, Andrew. Your tie is very nice. And Don, Jim, and Mr. Chairman as well. Just want to say that Madam Speaker, members of TWU Local 100 and Veronica Vanderpool, in all of their comments, stated that that this was a very poor transportation system here in New York. Well, I'm going to tell you that it's about to be improved. There are 22 projects that are currently being constructed in the NIMTIC Unified Workers Plan, the New York City Metropolitan Transportation Council. I'd like to describe a couple of them to the board. The first is BRT, of course, on 34th Street. The second one is the Penn Station Environmental Assessment Project with access to Metro North right at Penn Station. The third is the Midtown Pedestrian Project with the redesigning of Herald Square included. The fourth is the Quality of Life Study according to the Environmental and Quality of One Life Improvement Study in the East Village. All 22 of these projects should be beneficial once they are constructed. And for a closer look at them, you can go to www.nimticnymtc.org. Thank you.
Next speaker, Christine Diamond.
Good morning, members of the board. I'm Christine Diamond. I'm a mother. I would consider myself a New Yorker since I came here from Australia when I was 23. And over the last year, I've spent a considerable amount of time on the subways, visiting pretty much every subway station in New York City and a few around the other boroughs as well. I write guidebooks about New York, and I would commend the MTA on a number of things. The incredible art we have in virtually every subway station, the Arts for Transit program. I've also noticed, particularly lately, the incredible advertising that we have around, which I imagine bring in considerable revenues. But listening to so many of the speakers today, it would seem that we're in the greatest city in the world. It would seem that there has to be a way, and no stone should be left unturned. We got through 9/11, and we got a lot of outside help around the world, around the country and whatever, but essentially it was New Yorkers pulling together to come up with the best way to get our city through that crisis. Well, there seems to be another crisis. The transport system is essential to any third world, any current urban city. But even more fundamental is the right for every child to have an education and not to be left behind. And it would seem on a very simplistic level to me that where all the other New Yorkers, the corporations, Wall Street and whatever, where they in coming forward and stepping forward, there would seem there must be a way where we can get subsidies, donations, institutions in order to further fund improvements and lack of cutbacks. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last two speakers are Elizabeth Bender and then a representative for Councilman Stephen Levin.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth. I'm an alcoholic in recovery. I'm also a student at LaGuardia Community College. I volunteer with David Rothenberg of the Fortune Society at WBAI, and I was currently working at Biscuits in Bath. Due to an injury, I'm unemployed right now. And as a member of this community and as a taxpayer, I ask please do not cut or raise the Metro cards. If we don't have enough money to educate ourselves by using the MTA to get to educational places. How can I get to a new job, my school, or Workforce One? And definitely not by taking a yellow cab when the meter clicks at $1 a block. Your MTA cuts may force people to reduce the quality of life, as I'm going through services such as food, Time Warner Cable, and meetings. To choose our MetroCard over a dental or medical bill for our pets or ourselves. And please don't cut access a ride. Keep our senior citizens going to the theater. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe you have one last speaker representing the Honorable Stephen Levin. Your name, please.
Good morning. My name is Ashley Thompson from Councilman Levin's office. He regrets that he wasn't able to be here this morning. He's at another important budget hearing regarding the preliminary budget for the Department of Education. But I will read testimony on his behalf. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today on the proposed changes in the level of service. I'm here to voice my opposition to the MTA service cuts. The MTA has proposed to cut 12 bus lines and 2 subway lines in my district and has threatened to discontinue student Metro cards. Public transportation is absolutely essential to my community, and I am strongly opposed to all of these service cuts. Buses and trains provide a fundamental service for consumers who contribute to the economic well-being of the community by traveling to our vibrant retail districts. In fact, most of the buses slated for cuts bring people from throughout Brooklyn and Queens to downtown Brooklyn. Not only would these cuts incapacitate straphangers, they would also severely hurt local businesses. The expansive and diverse senior citizen population in my district would also be dramatically hurt by the proposed bus cuts. Cutting the B39 and B51 buses would be particularly crippling. They are the only local buses which travel from Brooklyn to Manhattan. If seniors do not have these buses, as well as the other 10 buses on the chopping block in my district, they will be immobile and isolated. I have also stood with my fellow elected officials numerous times in my short tenure in office in opposition to the proposed termination of the Student MetroCard program. Especially in these tough economic times, adding travel adding travel as an expense to a student's education is simply unacceptable. Families should not have to choose between sending their child to school or paying their rent. Eliminating the Student MetroCard program would add close to $1,000 per student to a family's budget, a burden too cumbersome for many families to endure. The MTA has threatened these cuts before. These proposed cuts were unacceptable then, and they are unacceptable now. I will continue to fight with my fellow elected officials to make sure that these buses do not get cut. Public transportation is extremely vital, from families traveling to school, to consumers coming to our shopping districts, to disabled straphangers who must rely on buses to get around our neighborhoods. The loss or reduction of these buses would be extremely devastating for our community. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. You were the 34th and last speaker. We turn this back over to the chairman. Thank you.
Doug, thank you, and thank you to the public speakers. If I can have a vote, please, to approve the minutes of the February meeting. Do I have a motion, please? In favor? Thank you. The first item of business this morning is the proposed revisions to our board committee charter. As we've been talking about, we are, as a company, overhauling every aspect of the way that we do business. And as part of that, we're also reorganizing how the board operates to support our services. I think there are 4 major changes that take place in that. First, that the railroads will meet together to ensure that we are operating in a more consistent and efficient manner. We'll have one bus committee that reflects the unified management of our 3 bus operations that we have today. Real estate will, going forward, be covered by the Finance Committee, and the capital construction projects, the so-called mega projects, will now be discussed in the operating committees of the organizations that will ultimately be responsible for the operations of those projects. I will continue to personally chair the Capital Program Oversight Committee, and I think we'll work to try to ensure that that committee takes a stronger role in the management and oversight of our capital program. I think these changes will help us to advance our mission. For this and for everything else, I certainly appreciate your support. May I have a motion, please? In favor? Opposed? Thank you. The next item of business are the proposed service changes. If I can just take one moment on that before discussion. I think it is important to continue to reiterate our budget situation and where we find ourselves today. In short, we have a nearly $800 million shortfall in 2010. That shortfall has not come from a shortfall in fare revenues. It has not come from an increase in expenses. The entire shortfall has come from two factors. It has come from a deterioration in our dedicated tax revenues, and it has come because the state cut $143 million of our dedicated funds and moved those monies instead to the general fund. That is the basis of the situation that we find ourselves in today. As a result of those external hits to our budget, this board has been forced to make tough decisions. We've cut 15% of administration across our business, including layoffs that will be taking place in that area as well. We have begun the process of laying off station agents. We've proposed the elimination of school fares. And we have the service cuts that we'll be addressing today. Over the past month, we engaged in a public hearing process. I believe we took that public hearing process seriously. We had 9 separate public hearings. 2,500 people attended the public hearings. 500 people spoke at the public hearings, and many more comments were submitted in writing to us as well. I don't think that the extent of the financial situation that we're in leaves us any real choice but to move forward with the majority of the service changes that have been proposed. But we did listen and we did make changes. We made modifications in every borough and throughout the region. We tried very much to find and listen to the comments about those situations that were most difficult, and I think we took steps to try to take them off the table. Nevertheless, I would be the first to say that the cuts that remain are painful. And I think we have to recognize that in our consideration today. The reality is that even as we get past this, we have another $400 million that we still need to close. I'd like to speak about that a little bit more after we talk about that and about some of the ways that we're going about approaching that. But that number still sits on the table. That number is still in front of us, and that is one heck of a hill still to climb for what we have to do. I know that many people on the board would like to speak on this issue, and so what I'd like to suggest is that we open the discussion, open this for discussion before we vote. And I will certainly give people the opportunity to be able to speak. As a reminder to the members of the board and to the public, we are not discussing the actions related to school fares, which did not require action today. So we're discussing the package of service changes absent that. So I will open it up. I will ask, just as a matter of organization, please. I will recognize people from the chair. I will ensure that everybody has an opportunity to speak who would like to speak. But please wait to be recognized by the chair. The floor is open for discussion. Mr. Vice Chairman?
Nobody likes this vote. It's obviously a very painful vote, and I don't think there's anybody sitting around this table that would take it lightly. It's a vote that affects a lot of people's lives. But we must also be realistic here. There will be no outside help from the city, from the state, and from the counties, and therefore we must squeeze every nickel that we can out of our own resources. As fiduciaries, we must run this agency in a responsible way. And I want everybody to be assured it's not only the riders that have taken cuts here. In the first 2 months of our fiscal year, we have saved approximately $55 million in expenses versus our budget. As our chairman has said, much more savings are on the way through major reductions in overhead and consolidation of our operations. I also would employ the unions to participate in the financial sacrifice so more layoffs aren't necessary. Their large 2-year wage increase here has cost approximately $600 million to this agency. $600 million in increases. The chairman and board committed to run this agency in the most productive way possible, giving our riders the most value for their hard-earned dollars, and I expect to participate in that decision.
I don't know if I want the microphone, but anyway. The reason why we need to take this action today and make these very tough decisions is because we still will be left with at least a $400 million deficit. And the MTA didn't just quickly respond to the crisis that we're dealt with the service cuts and with the layoffs. The organization initially or immediately dealt with it on an administrative side, and this building alone will reduce its staff by 20%. And I've said this before, but labor must be a part of making this organization financially healthy. The burden shouldn't just lie with the public. Many of you who are, the public, are riders, many who are working class and poor, and with the station agents and administrative workers who will lose their job. The labor force must be part of the solution. The overtime, sick time, and work rules of many of our union workers must be seriously considered as part of the solution. So the
what kind of work have you got? Let the woman speak, please.
Thank you. And I'm not paid to do this, by the way. So, and to sum it up, the burden shouldn't just be on the riders and on some of the people that are sitting right in this room who are facing layoffs. The burden should also be on the labor force with some ridiculous work rules there are.
Excuse me. We have offered an opportunity for public speaking. We've respected that opportunity. There is a business of the board to be dealt with now, and I would ask people to respect the right of the board to please speak. Carl?
Yeah. Thank you. I totally agree with the vice chairman and with fellow board member Nancy Chevelle, and I think that some people are actually recession-proof, especially the unions. I think that everybody is trying very hard to cut and to contribute to make this budget happen, and we have to do this. We're mandated by law to do it, and we only have certain alternatives in order to do this budget, and we're trying our best to do it and trying to do the best we can with what we have. And I also want to thank Jay Walter for all the things that he's done to try to make this equal across the board to everybody. And everybody has to contribute a little bit to make this thing happen and make it palatable for everybody. Thank you.
Andrew?
This is really a very dark day for transit users in the metropolitan region.
I've been watching Transit Matters for 35 years or so, and I've never seen a situation like this. These cuts are as if you went into a small town and told a quarter of the population, we're taking your cars away. That's the way this is going to hit New Yorkers. I just think traveling is going to be unbelievable after these cuts. I think it's going to affect the region's economy, the lifestyle. I think it's going to affect entertainment. I think it's going to affect restaurants. And I think it's going to hurt New York's ability to pull out of this recession. This transit system is the jewel that keeps New York somewhat, not totally, but somewhat recession-proof. Things can be done to change this situation. Do our elected officials have what it takes? That's the question. They talk a good game. They come here and they say, don't do this, don't do that. But I haven't seen the money. In fact, they voted to take $143 million away from us after imposing this very painful payroll tax that everybody abhors, but we thought was going to save our service. I mean, they're talking out of both sides of their mouths, and this cannot be allowed to continue. There's some things that could be done that actually don't cost the state, and they got their own money problems, any money. Things like tolls on the Harlem and East River bridges. You know, that would equalize traffic, that would save fuel, that would stop congestion in the South Bronx and downtown Brooklyn. You know, now that at least Senator Espada is starting to talk about that, so that's progress. There's congestion pricing. We could see that, the return of that, which would which would actually help the transit system a good deal. There's a small tax on gasoline, which, gasoline fluctuates every week. You see it every week. People would hardly feel a 1 or 2 cent tax on gasoline. That would save the transit system. There's things that we could probably do. You've heard a lot of talk about the stimulus. I don't know why we're not doing what some of the other cities have done. Unless we're saving that for the next $400 million problem that we have, which is a possibility. I don't know that. We're using operating funds to help the capital program, which at this really dire point in time, maybe we shouldn't be doing. Now, staff, to their benefit, have done a pretty good job, restoring some of the worst things, but it's still going to be impossible. And you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. I'll give you an example. The change from 100 to 125% loading. I took the number 1, the number 2, and the shuttle this morning. I was packed in like you would not believe. And I thought to myself, what's it going to be like when it's like that in off-peak hours too? That's what it's going to be like. Here's another absurdity. We just spent, or in the process of spending, $80 million to rehabilitate the Atlantic Viaduct. We just gave Ratner a place in downtown Brooklyn. He's going to have entertainment. He's going to have sports. He's going to have concerts. You won't be able to get home if one of those run late because we're cutting service on the Brooklyn part of the Long Island Railroad after midnight. You're going to have to go. You're going to have to take the subway to Penn Station to get back to Long Island. It's absurd. The staff has said, we've tried to do this and give you alternatives. Well, the loss of the Q79, there is no alternative to that. That bus is not near anything else, so that's just simply not the case there. The loss of the M service. I think it's great that the M is going to provide residents of Middle Village and Ridgewood with a direct Midtown service. That's something they would really like. Unfortunately, it's going to come at the expense of West End Line riders in Brooklyn. And if you want to do that now, you're going to have to ride the biggest, the most crowded trains, the 4 and the 5, and change at Atlantic Pacific, one of the busiest places. So that's not good. The loss of half-hourly off-peak service on the Port Washington branch. That should almost be a transit line that is so heavily used and comes very close to one of the top lines on the Long Island Railroad to meeting its expenses. Yet we're doing this just for dollar's sake. The loss of booth agents. I can't say enough about this. Even if you think, and some people do, but I'm not one of them, even if you think they don't do anything, they have the ability to call the police and broadcast a description of somebody. We were promised, I'm sorry, we were promised by the time these kinds of measures went in, we would have operational cameras and operational intercoms, and we have neither right now. I was told the wiring isn't even in place to do the intercoms yet. I certainly could not sleep at night knowing that I was part of this until we had adequate protection for our customers. Like I said, and I said it very off, in a humorous way, I wouldn't mind having the pepper spray concession at some of these stations. I've been down there. It's very lonely. With worse service, it's going to get more lonely down there. And, you know, the waits are going to be longer. I wish we had the countdown clocks in all the places, but we don't yet. I applaud the chairman for his movement to get high tech in the system, and this is one part of high tech that I think we got to move expeditiously to get in. I didn't need the Department of Homeland Security to tell me this was a bad idea. I didn't need that. Now, this is a problem not caused by anybody around this table. These folks are not your enemy around this table. They're doing what they feel they have to do, and they've been dealt a really, really tough hand. I think the chairman has done an admirable job in trying to trim, you know, excess administration and excess costs and all of that kind of thing. But I have to say that this is going to really change the New York way of life, and I don't think it's going to be pretty, and I really hope that somebody comes to our rescue, because for us to be at this situation in the most transit-dependent city in North America is really an abomination. Thank you.
Sorry. Mr. Chairman, you know that this troubles me. When you sit here and you hear a single parent get up and talk about the fact that she's losing her job and she has 2 or 3 mouths to feed at home, send them to school, clothe them, feed them, take them to the doctors. You sit here, you listen to individuals talk about not being able to get on Access-A-Ride because it's being cut. You sit here, you listen to a young lady talk about Ridgewood, Brooklyn, where the service is going to be cut and the seniors are trapped in their homes. I'm a believer in people come to New York because New York is the greatest city in the world. People don't come from overseas and go to Pennsylvania. They come to New York City. They come to New York City because it's a city that never sleeps. It's 24 hours a day, it's 7 days a week. We're changing that motto, and I think that we need to back up off of all of these service cuts and everything else and layoffs until we've looked under every rock. And we haven't looked under every rock. I know we haven't looked under every rock because I'm sitting here at this board meeting. And I sit in these meetings. And just Monday, it was mentioned that it's going to cost us between $6 and $8 million from 92nd Street to 97th Street in extra monies to finish this 2nd Avenue subway, relocate people, fix up landlords' buildings. And I'm saying to myself, well, when this first took place with the budget, this should have been projected. We keep going over and over and over and over, and there's no end in sight to build the 2nd Avenue subway that's never going to be completed. I don't care what you tell me. It's never going to be completed. It's not going to happen. And we're talking about laying off people that really need a job right now. We're talking about putting people out in the street that really need shelter right now. So now they lose their job. Now they, all right, collect unemployment, but it's not going to be as much. They're not going to be happy. And I don't understand how we can do this when I know for a fact that there are other ways to do it. The MTA could look at renegotiating contracts with the vendors. Optical, dental, prescription. These vendors are making a ton of money. They need to be held hostage the same way they're holding us hostage. The same way we need to push the envelope. Albany is not going to let the mass transit system stop running. Neither is the city of New York. So if we do absolutely nothing, but keep running up a bill, somebody somewhere in the city or the state is going to say, we got to bail these people out. Other than that, we need to be a private corporation. Because obviously, if we're not getting any help from the city, we're not getting any help from the state, then we are a private corporation. And if we're a private corporation, then we need to do things to make things come together. And I don't think laying off people is the answer. I don't think that cutting service to the seniors, cutting service in the middle of the night, cutting service to anyone is the answer. I don't think that, allowing this accessoride program, especially that. When that gentleman stood there and said that you could walk out in the street, get hit by a car, and be disabled like that, I said, oh, shit, man. It could happen. And then what do? I'm the same person that would sit there and go, oh, wow, and I voted to take it away. I got to be real careful about that. You know, I still live in the Bronx. I am not jumping in car services and going all around the city. I do what I have to do. When that young lady said, I don't feel her pain, she doesn't understand. I feel your pain. I grew up on welfare. I feel your pain. That's why I can't sit here and agree to something that I know I didn't look further for. It's not that I want to say no to service and say no to increases, but I can't do it with good conscience and look people in the eye and say, you know what, I did the right. I just can't do that. Not when I know we can look further. I know there's money there. I know it is. And the people in Albany, you know, they talk a good game. This whole board, the 15 voting board members plus yourself, boss, we need to go up there. We need to shake them down too. We need to shake them down because they put the pressure on you, and you came here, you caught a bad rap, man. You caught a bad rap. You came across the pond. I know you wish you went back. I know you do. You got to. You have to wish you didn't come to this, man. You saying, oh, man, look what they left me. Yeah, they left you a bag. They left you a bag. The guy that used to sit there, they bagged you, man. They bagged you. And you know what? They set you up. And now we got to try to pull all of us out of this situation that we're in. And it's going to be difficult. But I know if we look to certain areas in this organization, we can do it. And just so that the public understands, the board members don't get paid for this. We don't get paid for this. So nobody here is a yes person for anybody because we don't get no money for this. We sit on this board because we're obligated to do what we're supposed to do for the people. And I'm a people-fighting person. And with all due respect, we need to, and I know it's not going to happen, but the board members in this room, we need to vote no and say, you know what, let's not make this move. Let's just back off. Even if it's for 60 days to take a look at something else, let's just back up off of this because this is going to turn New York City into something that we never want to see. We got the poor mayor has got a budget crisis that's going on, and he's about to lay off police officers, firefighters. This is getting out of control now. And we really need to put our heads together and come together because it's going to be a major impact. So if you're going to lay off 3,000 police officers and you lay off 600 agents at the station, we really have a problem. We really have a problem. We really need to take a look at this. And with all due respect, I'm just asking that we hold it, pull back for 60 days. Take a look at it for 60 days at every single thing that the MTA pays for. And let's try to do better. And then, at that point, we could honestly say to the public, we've looked under every rock. We've looked under every stone. When I told you Monday when I had the information that we're paying $6 to $8 million to relocate people, where are they staying at? In the Ritz-Carlton? $6 to $8 million we're spending. That's a lot of money. And that's only for 5 blocks. And we got to go all the way downtown on 2nd Avenue. So that means as we go further down, the price goes further north, and nobody told us about this. We really need to take 60 days just to look at every option that's out there. But I know we can't do it, and I know you probably say, Norm, we got to move forward with this. So you do what you got to do, brother, but you know I can't ride with you on that one. I got to vote no on that one. All right? I got to vote.
I'm glad. Thank you. Alan.
I love you, Jim.
Having been on this board now for almost 2 years, I still haven't quite figured out whether it's better to speak before Norman or after him. And I'm still not sure. Picking up on one of the things that Norman said, I grew up in a poor household. My family, my mother was widowed, a widowed immigrant to the city. With 4 children, we either walked or we took the bus. We don't have subways where I live, in Staten Island, which is part of the city, and a promise that this city has broken to it. over the years. So I perhaps come with a sensitivity to the level of bus service and the level of bus service cuts that we're having here that may be a little different than the experience that some of you have. As I got older in my professional life and was able to work in Lower Manhattan and have the great luxury of going down the block and getting into a subway and being able to travel all over the city, I really learned to love and appreciate what a great transportation system that we have, and has served me well professionally over my 30-some-odd years as someone who's been in and out of government and is now engaged in the service. Actually, the difficulty of the bus rider, it's kind of ironic, was reinforced to me on an early January morning when Chairman Walter came out to Staten Island, and we had an unannounced trip, and we had an opportunity to chat as we made a couple of short visits on the island to take care of a few things, and we stood on the bus stop, and I was freezing as we were waiting, and I said to myself, God, it's really cold, and it really reinforced to me the difficulty of the bus rider who has to stand out there waiting in all kinds of weather for service to come through nor'easters and snowstorms, and doesn't have the luxury of being able to go down even into a cold subway station at times. That's a luxury for those people, and in a way, you got to kind of look at, walk in somebody else's shoes, and standing out on the deep South Shore and trying to navigate your way into the center of commerce in this city is an extraordinarily difficult task for many people in Staten Island. At one time I had to correct someone on this board who suggested that express buses were a luxury, and that they're highly subsidized. Well, it would be the subsidy would be, or the cost would be a lot greater if we were to put subway lines in and into Staten Island and connect us in a realistic way to the rest of the city that New York Transit did for the other 4 boroughs. So I come at it from a local perspective, and from that perspective, I'm very grateful to the staff and to the chairman for, I think, a very thoughtful process, a process that essentially saved 2 very minimally used bus services that people would not have been able to do in any other way. Although I will tell you, I rode one of those buses with Councilwoman Debbie Rose last week, and I was shocked at how crowded it was. And it makes me question as to just how some of these counts get taken. But be that as it may, it is one of the services that the 42 that's going to be restored, and I'm very appreciative of that. I'm sorry that the X-16, which also serves the North Shore, is not being saved. At least in this package, it's slated for elimination, and I believe that that's a mistake. Although I do know that there is technically another service. You can take the bus and wait forever for that to get down to the ferry and deal with all of the local traffic that just keeps choking us more and more. And we seem to be going in an opposite green direction. We need to get cars off the streets. We need to increase transportation. We need to build rail lines, but we don't have the money, and I understand that. I went to every public hearing that I could logistically attend, there being some conflicts because of dual scheduled hearings. I did it last year. I did it this year. All of the voices of all of the people who spoke resonate in my head, and I have debated this thing in my mind for every single day that we've gone through this process, because I knew that this day would come, and I know that this is an extraordinarily sad day for public transportation in New York. one of the things, and I understand the frustrations of the public out there, and I really accept in many instances the abuse hurled at me as well as the rest of you because of their frustration and not really understanding the nature of how this problem was created. I was infuriated by the responsibility of, infuriated by the actions of our state legislators and other public officials who testified at the public hearings and essentially tried to blame us for what in essence is entirely their responsibility. As the chairman correctly pointed out before, the cuts that we are forced to deal with were essentially the legislature creating a plan that promised us an amount of money, and then they gave us the equivalent of a bad check. That came in short to the tune of $450 million, and then they had the chutzpah to come back at us in December and take another $143 million of dedicated transportation money, and for people to come to the public hearings who know better and to criticize us for the money that they didn't give to us is just wrong, and it degrades public policy debate in the state, and they ought to be ashamed of themselves. Switching my hat for a moment from the Staten Island to the overall region, I'm not just a Staten Islander, but I'm a New Yorker. I care about the whole region. There's some of the cuts that I have difficulty with in Bay Ridge and other parts of Brooklyn and in Queens have been mentioned by some of the speakers, as well as my brother Andrew Albert over there, and I share the pain that he has shared with you all as to the sadness of this day for all of us. And I will not engage in criticizing any member of this board because I believe it's a very, very close call. I've spoken with many of you before we got here today to find out what you were going to do, what your thoughts were. I've had the argument back and forth in my head as to how I would vote, and I intend to vote no on this. But I'm not looking for applause. I'm looking to redirect people's to the proper source of resolving this problem. I believe that we could build a bridge to another day, and one board member said to me, well, what you're saying is essentially a bridge to hope. And you can't concretely tell us that 2 years from now that the money will be there. Well, I do have hope. I've seen great things happen. I saw a great thing happen this week in Washington. And I do believe in hope, and I do believe in our chairman. I think that we got a really great transportation person who has brought in top-notch people who have impressed the hell out of me, and I believe in the next 2 years we will find a way to make those cuts. But I can't guarantee it because there are no guarantees in this. And as has been said to me, do you expect the legislature to all of a sudden come back and do the right thing? Do you expect the legislature to give us the $150 million or $143 million that they essentially stole from you last year? And I don't. Okay, I hope that the people in this room and in the overflow areas and who are listening out there will direct themselves towards the legislature. I'm very happy to hear from Jimmy Vacca. I thought his response today was extraordinarily responsible, and for Speaker Quinn in suggesting that she's willing to help lead a battle to restore the funding from the city and the state to fund MetroCards, which is where that responsibility lies. It's not the provider's responsibility, it's the municipality and the government. I won't go on any longer. I could speak. I spoke before the Senate Transportation Committee for an hour last week, and the week before, and the Finance Committee last week. I've shared many of my thoughts with them on that we've spoken today. I will continue to advocate on behalf of this agency and for the riders throughout the region. I'll go to Washington. I'll go to Albany. I'll do whatever the chairman needs me to do. But today I have to vote no. Thank you.
I can assure you that in my 16 years on this board, many decisions that had to be made were made. Very serious votes, but by far this is really the most onerous that I've taken part in. I've been through the spectrum from the beginning, but I can assure you that from my perspective, there are things happening within the MTA family that have never happened before. There are rocks that are being unturned that have never been turned before, and I think this is a tribute to Chairman Wilder. We do have a very serious problem ahead of us, but I also understand that we also have to have a balanced budget. And this is probably the only way in the short term we can get to it. We can't turn over something that's been in this shape for as long as it is in a matter of 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Remember, back in December, this budget was balanced. We're now looking 3 months later at trying to come up with fill an $800 million deficit. So while it's tough to make those tough choices, I don't think we have any other alternatives. Thank you.
This is obviously a difficult day, but I feel like we've been at this before. Every 3 months, every 6 months, every time we have a budget conversation, this MTA board has said we have a problem. Going back for at least 3 years now, the board has gone to Albany and has said we have a major structural problem. This isn't going to last. There are some real problems. For 2 years, the mayor fought for congestion pricing to fund the MTA. For a year, the Governor Patterson and now Lieutenant Governor Ravitch proposed the Ravitch Commission to fund the MTA with bridge tolls and some other taxes. For 3 years, everyone has known this was coming. These service cuts are not brand new. In fact, a lot of them were on the table last year when we said to Albany, there's a problem and we need to find a way to fix it. I think at probably every single meeting we've had about this, Commissioner Seabrook has come up with new ideas of taxing more cigarettes, taxing more alcohol, and anything we can possibly tax. We've asked, and we've continued to ask, and at some point, Albany hasn't acted. They acted a couple months ago, probably like maybe a year ago at this point, in which they passed the payroll tax, which, as Commissioner Capelli said, was a bad check. It came in shy $400 million. In December, they took $143 million away from the MTA overnight. I don't even think they realized what they were voting for. But we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We've been asked, and people have said we should look at using the stimulus fund as pay-go capital. All that would do is kick the can down the road. This problem is here. We've known it's here. It's been here for 3 years. And at this point, there's not much else we can do except fend for ourselves. The chairman has outlined a plan in which he's turning every rock upside down. We have to all pay the bills. There's plenty of subways and buses still running that need to run. You need to pay the labor force and get the place going. We focus on the cuts, which of course are terrible and we don't want to do. But you still have to operate a system every day that moves millions and millions of people. You have to do that by maintaining the systems. You have to do that by paying the workforce. The chairman, by outlining all the administrative cuts and looking at various programs, needs to look in all areas. We can't wait for someone else to come in and give us a lifeline because we've waited for too long. We can't turn our backs and say, you know what, we can postpone this vote again for another 60 days or 90 days because at some point, by the way, the cash runs out. At some point, you can't pay the bills. And that's no one wants to go down into the subway and not be able to get on it. We've had this discussion many times. So I think we're being forced to take a vote here that no one really wants to take, but we have to take. We have to take this vote in order to keep the lights on. We have to look at new ways on Access-a-Ride. We've been working really hard with the MTA, and as Speaker Quinn mentioned, on the taxi and livery service. I hope that through this process of Access-a-Ride, we can come together with a plan, and I've asked that we continue to stay updated on the various proposals of the Access-a-Ride program, and to let the community know and the riders know exactly how we're going to meet those goals, because I think it is clear that if we're going to make changes to a system that costs hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and growing each year, everyone needs to know how we're going to get there. So we do have to keep the eye on the ball in that program. While I don't expect massive changes out of Albany, since we've asked for the last 3.5 years, there's one piece not for discussion today, but I do expect Albany to come through, because I think if they haven't heard it from everyone else, they're going to hear it from the students of the City of New York. And I do expect and I do hope that Albany does put back at least the money for the student fares, because that is an issue clearly that no one should stand for. But today we're forced to take a vote on devastating service cuts, but we can't kick the can. And as much as we'd like to kick the can, as much as I'd want to have that hope for something to come through, we've asked and we've never gotten. So for that, I think we have to move forward today.
Not only have we asked and asked, we've asked and it's been taken away. My brothers Norman and Ellen have spoken eloquently, but the people who spoke this morning, especially the mothers and the teachers, spoke more to my heart than any board member has. Two things I want to say, and then I'll summarize. First of all, the station agents have spoken eloquently for themselves, and they speak well and clearly as to what their role is. We are also losing administrative and managerial staff, and nobody speaks for them here. I speak for them. Their loss is great, too. Secondly, I really appreciate the fact that this board listened at the hearings and actually made some restitutions. I've been through a few of these situations, and I have not seen that happen before this, not only for this board, but for other organizations that I've followed as well. And I appreciate the fact that, particularly, that some of the speakers at those hearings made very good points, and the service was restored in that line. That I really appreciate. That, to me, says we are moving forward. We are standing at the edge of an abyss. I have hope. I have hope for 2 years. But it's today I'm worried about. And we do have bills to pay, and we can't pay remaining staff with IOUs. I will vote yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak, as always. I guess I want to address kind of the policy thrust I see that's going on, and having listened to everybody speaking here, and I appreciate everybody's positions. I think I understand where you're coming from, and part of it, while I appreciate it and understand it, I don't think it's leading us in the right direction, and bear with me, I'll try to make it as brief as possible. You know I like to talk. The purpose of the federal stimulus program was to stimulate, and I think that Marty Golden spoke pretty clearly to that. A stimulus that doesn't create or preserve jobs does not really stimulate. A lot of what they've done in the stimulus so far has been to support unemployment insurance, extensions of COBRA, and the like, which are inferior methods of fiscal stimulation. Taking jobs out of the stimulus program is like taking orgasm out of sex. And a lot of what we're trying to do here, you've got to say, well, like, why are we doing it? And you have to have an answer for it. Now, in this case, it's kind of, there was a shell game played with the MTA money that I think everybody on the board is aware of, and I think most of the politicians are aware of as well, whereby we just went through the exercise, we struggled to get new streams of revenue into Albany. New streams of revenue came in, and they were diverted, and the MTA took the political blame for the payroll tax, but other other needs in New York State took the financial value of the payroll tax. And then the payroll tax itself didn't turn up the money that it was supposed to turn up. But of course, it's a severe economic crisis, and the flows of funds are disrupted all over the place. But in this case, you're going to have laid off people staying home, getting federal money for their unemployment insurance extensions and their COBRA extensions, instead of working, doing what many people think are inferior jobs. Many other people think they're jobs that can be replaced by technology. Many other people think they're make-work jobs, but all of the jobs I know have substantial value. Well, the station agents have substantial value. The operating crafts will be losing their jobs, and the commuter rail lines have substantial value. And the stimulative effect of a guy working a job is infinitely greater than an unemployment check that just keeps someone at home and surviving. Failure to take the offered federal money during a period of clear financial crisis is the mirror image of how we got to where we are with the MTA debt. The desire to protect your capital money coming from the federal government is sort of the opposite of what went on in the last 2 decades when the economy was booming and resources were high in Albany. Albany decided that was a great time to borrow money for the capital plan that would later be paid back by the operating budget. Well, now's the later. So it's the exact opposite equation. That borrowing now weighs heavily on the operating budget. Refusal to take federal money is really, you can see it from part of the debate here at the board, is split evenly between people that are, everybody's saying they don't want to do this. On the other hand, other people here have clearly stated, take it out of wages, take it out of labor concessions, which for the moment you can't really do. It needs agreement with the unions to do that. The focus of the board's comments on labor concessions, though, I feel, destroys the social capital necessary to make the agreements that you need. I'll tell you this, I negotiate agreements all the time, and in the last 2 years we have negotiated many wage freezes in my union. We've negotiated many what the members consider concessionary agreements that have been very, very painful and very difficult to do. In all those circumstances, though, where the members did agree to suffer through some economic duress, they were all based upon long-term relationships of trust and support from the ownership of those companies. These are owners that built these companies from the bottom up at great risk to their own personal economic well-being. And yes, we've had many battles with those companies over the years, but through those battles we learned to trust each other and learn that while we may be adversaries at the bargaining table, for the employees to thrive, the company has to thrive. Well, you've just not had that sort of social capital construction here at the MTA, and I think part of that is driven by the way the enormous size of this operation and its location in a political cauldron like New York, where there's just so much pressure on the different parties, and the owners are very, very remote. In this case, the owners are really the bondholders, and the bondholders are doing just fine. The main reason the bondholders are doing fine is the federal government bailed out the banks. The banks would have all collapsed, and they would have gone down too. So it's really a question here too of at what point you want to start building up the social capital necessary to get agreements from the unions, whether they're in terms of concessions now or the next collective bargaining agreement, and continuing to flog a dead horse at this arbitration. You lost the arbitration a year ago, and many people here still advocate going to court and trying to have it overturned again, even though you lost and you're going to lose again. And it's not the way to, this is not the way to get agreements from people who want to protect their jobs. And I'm one who wants to engage people. Keeping everyone employed here is very, very critical. That's really the union's job as much as anything else. And I do feel for the managers too that have been who's spent their entire work lives building careers here, and now entire departments must be cut away. Now, I do think that part of what's going on here is a tendency in the board to use the financial crisis to make cuts that you would otherwise not make, in terms of service or in terms of labor. And I think we just have to turn around our direction and work on building trust between the parties to where we can make agreements with each other and have those agreements honored. Thank you very much.
I don't want to go too long because Andrew actually stole my thunder on Port Washington branch and some specific cuts, and certainly bus cuts. In Queens, there's some cuts we're making which are really serious. It says in our own documentation that for over 1,000 people, we're adding up to 30 minutes for their trip. To me, that's a serious. That's opaquely serious. We're not, sugarcoating anything there, and maybe there's even more riders. But I think, the Port Washington branch, the cuts are ridiculous because of, how well the branch does, and we're going to have crowding. But I think taking, some of what I think, I'm very happy Alan's on the board. His comments are very good. Both Normans, following both Normans is difficult. But I know, we've discussed our fiduciary responsibility. The legislature decided that we had to sign an extra document regarding our fiduciary responsibility. Richard Ravitch spoke at a PCAC meeting some time ago, and he said he thinks the fiduciary responsibility of board members should be to the riding public. And I think in voting for these cuts, you really have to consider that you may be breaching what he described. Now, that may not be something on paper. We have a fiduciary responsibility to have a balanced budget, but there's also responsibility to the public. And there was a promise made last year, and it wasn't just us, it was the legislature, that there wouldn't be service cuts, that there wouldn't be fare increases. And they broke that promise. And I think some of what Alan said is we should not stand here and be scapegoats. And I think that's what Alan's trying to say, is we have to stand up and say, we made a promise that's as important as the promise to have a balanced budget, to not make the service cuts. And I think that's why he's voting no, and that's why I would not want to sit here and tell, because I don't have a vote, to tell all the rest of you how to vote. But I think, in thinking that through and hearing what some members said, I would urge people to vote no and to put the pressure on politically. And I don't really need applause, because I think it's a very, very difficult decision to vote no, because you're not even pushing an envelope. Where does that leave our agency? I don't know, but as Alan said, I'm prepared to go to Albany and do what it takes myself to try and get money restored. Thank you.
I think that this question of a balanced budget, which sounds sort of obscure and theoretical, is actually a way of describing a situation which will enable us as an agency to continue to provide the mass transportation we're responsible for. You can't run trains, pay people, buy electricity, fix things without money. And if you have less money than is basically required for your ongoing function, it doesn't work. So where do you get the money? As a practical matter, you look at whether you can spend less on the margin. A lot of our revenue comes from the fares, and ultimately that is a subject that we do have control over as a body, and that will no doubt, that factor is not going to go away. And you can get money from the city and state, other layers of government. Where does their money come from? Taxes. We're all very much aware that the taxes that government has in place have been producing less money over the last couple of years. Hopefully we'll come back out of that over time, but for the moment, the money's just not there. And we can seek to press the priority of our mass transit service with the city and state, but the reality that we're looking at is that neither of those bodies has the money to maintain the level of spending and service that people expect of them. So that, yes, you can go to Albany and ask for money, but does that mean that you think it's a good idea for Albany to increase the taxes that it charges? Is it a good idea for Albany to cut other services? I mean, that's really the debate that you're in, and you're in the same one with the city. And we're not out of that debate, even with the cost reductions before us today. This is a small part of dealing with the deficit that currently faces us for this year. I think that for us to go forward without recognizing that there is under our current financial circumstances, there is a service impact to the fact we don't have enough money is not realistic, because every other essential service is facing exactly that squeeze. As you look at what's going on in Albany, it seems clear that whatever happens, school aid in the state of New York is going to be significantly less than what people have come to expect and rely on. That's going to have direct consequences in terms of how we run schools. That's just one example. I don't think we can keep ourselves away from that aspect of the world that we're in, or that debate that's going on here, Albany, City Hall, nationally to some degree. And that the step that we're facing today is certainly painful in all the ways that all kinds of people have made very clear. But, you know, I don't believe that the steps proposed are out of line with the kinds of service impacts that are occurring, have occurred, and will be occurring more so going forward in terms of what public money is able to provide in services for the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's hard to add anything of substance to the already comprehensive comments from this very responsible board. I would associate myself with many of them, particularly Jeff Kay's. I think it was certainly well phrased. When he said that we're on our own, I think we really are. The time for waiting for a fairy godmother to come by and sprinkle some fairy dust is over, and it's time for the adults to take over here. That being said, I think we also need to recognize that we are first and foremost a service organization, and as a rider representative, service is our number one, my number one concern. We all recognize the pain that these service cuts are imposing on a ridership that is in times like this very fragile, and I personally feel that, and I feel it through the hearings, and I feel it through the testimony here today. I think the chairman's strategy of demonstrating to one and all that we are serious about managing our fate by ourselves and looking to our lights, in a sense, and taking the hits where we need to inside the organization is critical in establishing our credibility and making these hard decisions more palatable generally. However, I would say that that being said, if we have if we are really on our own, we should look to all available resources to save our primary obligation, which is service, and that would, in my view, mean to look to this stimulus money as a means to at least mitigate the service hit that we are taking. I know that there's a theoretical and, in a sense, an emotional desire not to do that because it violates some very basic principles. But difficult times call for difficult solutions or difficult approaches. So I would say that with that, that if we could amend our approach, this would result in fewer service reductions, that this would be beneficial. Down the road, I think it's been stated or implied that we have major problems ahead of us that really make that hole deeper, and that in those situations we are going to have to look to all constituencies, and all of the constituencies are going to have to put the adults in charge, so that we together can handle our problem. The time for bluffing is really over, and as difficult as these service cuts are, if we can mitigate them, I think we should. But unfortunately, that is going to have to be part of our near-term game plan.
Thank you. As many of you on the board know, I have been talking very actively about using stimulus and pay-go to offset these service cuts. So much so that the editorial board of the New York Post threw a rock at me for suggesting that that's what we should be doing. But I considered it a badge of honor at the time. And I felt very optimistic in December and January, up until February 1st of this year, that indeed, with all of the very painful but very courageous and necessary measures that the chairman has taken to streamline this agency, to lay off administrative staff, and to do a lot of the things that, quite frankly, we should have been doing for many years, that maybe we could pull it off, that if a second stimulus bill would be coming out of Washington, which we all believed would be the case, we could take some of that money and offset these service cuts. Well, what happened? The Senate decided, Congress decided, that putting through one massive stimulus bill early in the year was not going to get sufficient votes on both sides of the aisle. So instead, they have cut stimulus into little pieces. One piece has happened. It didn't contain a nickel for transit. Another one is about to happen that does not contain a nickel for transit. And we're hearing that, well, maybe there'll be a third and a fourth that could provide some sort of future relief.
but it's coming too late. Secondly, on February 2nd, while we were in the market borrowing funds to buy more subway cars, to fix up stations, to pay our bills, we learned from the state that another $350 million was going to drop out of the bottom. At that point, quite frankly, I lost hope. This is a huge hill to climb. Someone talked about promises being made and hope about promises being kept. This town is going to be awash in broken promises as a result of this economic meltdown. $1.4 billion cut to the school system, $1.3 billion to the city. We are living in fantasy land if we think that there's a white knight in Albany that's going to save us. They are making very difficult choices of their own, and unfortunately, transit is never on anyone's top 3 of things that need to be saved, and that is a crying shame. I agree with you, Norman, that the simplest thing we would all think would be, raise the gas tax by 2 or 3 cents. I'm told that that's an anathema in the upstate communities, where quite frankly we employ people in Plattsburgh and Oriskany in building subways and buses. It would be great if we could get that 2% increase, because I think it would help a lot. But the fact of the matter is that's a difficult choice that is not in our power to make. The only thing that we could do is make sure that in this shrunken transit system that we now have to operate as a result of these cuts, that we do it to the best of our abilities, and that we make sure that every nickel that is spent around here is spent more wisely. A lot of us weren't around when decisions were made to spend $120 million on historic preservation of a building at Fulton Street. But we're here now, and we have to make sure that no other silly decisions are made in these regards.
I don't want to repeat what everyone has said, and everyone has said it much more eloquently than I can, unfortunately. But this is a very, very sad day. We've had a number of sad days here over the last number of years, and I fear that we will continue to have them, because as Commissioner Kay clearly pointed out and others have indicated, we are on our own here. I do not expect Albany to come to the rescue. I don't expect Washington to come to the rescue. As a suburban member, I've been criticized before for supporting congestion pricing or for supporting tolls on the East River bridges. But I think I have strongly supported those endeavors because I think they're part of a regional transportation system that has to encompass everyone. And I applaud the mayor for doing that and trying to get those through. And I have argued with my suburban members from Long Island who oppose it, when in reality Long Islanders would be substantially benefited more from it than they would ever pay. And yet the legislature in its wisdom has decided not to do that. I was very, very impressed by the public hearings. As a Long Islander, bus service is usually anathema to Long Islanders. And the passion in which many people, especially those in Staten Island and Brooklyn, talked about how important the bus system is to them was far beyond anything I've heard of with regard to a mass transit system in this region. I'm glad to see that the board, working with the chairman, were able to make some of the service reductions more palatable. Obviously, we have some issues on Long Island, some of which we were able to take care of, especially Ronkonkoma to Greenport, some of which are still there, which we hope in some point we can restore, because as I always say, the train system is still there. If we can find the money at some point in the future, we can restore those services that we're going to have to cut. But this is a very, very difficult day for all of us, especially many of us who have been involved in this system for over 35 years. It's unfortunate we are to this situation, but I think we have to make the decision we have to make today
to get to the future. I think delaying a decision or not doing it, I think would actually be worse for the system in the future than doing it. And as a result of that, with a very deep heart, I will vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I got involved with the MTA, I've been asked to make many difficult votes. The only thing I fear more than the vote that I'm going to cast today is the vote that I'm going to be asked to cast in the near future.
There's obviously been a lot of discussion about this. I'd like to call it to a vote if that's okay with everybody. Is that, we have two motions that we have to take a vote on. The first is the adoption of a negative declaration regarding the environmental impacts of service changes based on the environmental assessment that was conducted and concluded. Can I ask for a motion on that, please? Second? In favor? Aye. Opposed? The second vote is a resolution authorizing the implementation of major service changes and the modification to the Cross Bay resident rebate program as described in the materials that you've had. Can I have a motion on that, please? In favor? Opposed? I record 2 noes. Thank you. We now move to the Committee on Finance.
Mr. Chairman, there are 2 action items. The first action item seeks approval of the actions listed on pages 51 to 53 of the board materials to provide for the extension of the MTA's owner-controlled insurance program for the East Side access. The second action item seeks approval to file with the State of New York the annual MTA all-agency procurement report for the period January 1st, 2009 to December 31st, 2009 as required under Section 2879 of the State Public Authority Law. I move all the action items.
In favor? Opposed? Thank you.
There are no competitive procurements or ratifications this month. There is 1 competitive procurement in the amount of $234,000. I move this procurement.
In favor?
Mr. Chairman, that includes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Fresca, please, the Committee on Transit.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Transit Committee, I present the following for the Board's approval. There are 17 transit procurements totaling $84.8 million. Of that, number 1 is non-competitive for $2 million. Committee recommends it, and I move it.
Do I have a second? In favor?
Aye. There are 13 competitive procurements in the amount of $44 million. Committee recommends them, and I move them.
In favor?
There are 3 ratifications this month in the amount of $38.8 million. They are recommended by the committee, and I move them.
In favor? Thank you.
There are no MTA bus procurements this month, and that concludes the transit report.
Thank you very much. Mitch, for Long Island Bus.
Thank you, sir. There is 1 non-competitive procurement in the amount of $35.2 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
In favor? Thank you.
There are 2 competitive procurements in the amount of $1.6.8 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
In favor? Thank you.
There are no ratifications, and there are no Long Island bus procurements. This concludes the Long Island Committee report for the last time, and I look forward to joining with my fellow commissioners from Metro North in our new rail committee next month. Thank you.
And I need to ask you to do double duty for the last time, too.
And we'll do, that's right, bridges and tunnels. There are no non-competitive procurements or ratifications this month. There are 4 competitive procurements in the amount of $4.4 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
In favor? Thank you. Jim?
Chairman, Mr. Hudson operated at 97.
Your microphone, Jim.
You need your microphone so that everybody can know the performance.
Metro North Railroad operated east of Hudson at 97.7% for the month of February. I'd like to present the following to the Board approvers. There's 1 competitive procurement totaling $11,111,684. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
In favor?
This concludes the Metro North Committee report, and I look forward to working with Long Island Railroad in the future.
Nancy?
The Capital Construction and Real Estate Committee had their last meeting, and I'd like to thank the committee of both Capital Construction and Real Estate for all the help they've given to me. There was one non-competitive, we'll vote on all these together, procurement and 2 competitive procurements. I'd like a motion to move them.
In favor?
No
Thank you.
ratifications this month. There were 4 real estate items for board approval. The committee recommends these items. I move them.
In favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And Nancy, thank you for chairing that committee and taking on the new responsibilities on MTA Bus. I'd like to ask for a motion to go into executive session, if we could do that, please.
Motion made.
Thank you. For the purpose, for the enumerated purposes of Section 105 of the Open Meetings Law, specifically for discussion concerning the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property of which would substantially affect the value thereof. Thank you. I don't think we need to.
Mr. Chairman, Mayor Bloomberg said within the last hour that the public should thank the MTA because the cuts are not as severe as they could have been. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Well, I think we've said from the beginning that we were attacking the cost structure of the MTA and trying to reduce the cost structure of the MTA. The benefit of that comes back to the riders. And I think in that sense, I do agree. But we have more work to do in doing it.
Jay, what are your plans to address the next?
Okay.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi.
Have you figured out any plans for addressing the next $400 million gap that you now have to face down?
So what we're doing is we're working across multiple fronts to be able to deal with that. We have reduced administrative staff across the board by 15% and 20% at headquarters. We are renegotiating with all of our major suppliers to the MTA and essentially making them aware of our financial situation and the difficulty of that financial situation. We're consolidating some of the MTA functions to further get further savings. We are looking and reducing our purchasing and inventory, and we are driving down overtime from the $500 million that's there. We're going through all those pieces. We're also engaged in a discussion with our labor partners. So we have met recently with the union leaders from all of our unions to discuss the financial situation, to get on a common page about the difficulties that the MTA is facing, and to begin the discussion with them about their ideas for how we can reduce costs at the MTA as well.
Do you think additional service contract price hikes will be needed to help close that, in addition to all the things you just mentioned?
Well, I think we're as I've said before, the intention is to stay with the schedule for the fare hike at the beginning of next year, we're still committed to that. And I think I do not think you'll be seeing service changes of the type that you're talking about here. We will continue, as we've said, to try to improve the operations and to try to make the operations more efficient.
When you say of the type, are you talking service changes, period, or of this grand scale?
Well, you won't see anything of a major size. As I said, we are continuing to look at our service and to try to make it more efficient. Everything we can do to operate our service more efficiently, protect the services that we're providing to our riders, is our goal. We have a very, very, very large hole to fill, and we are turning over every stone to be able to do that.
Mr. Chairman, if you Rich Lamb.
What do you say? Okay, then. What do you say to the millions of subway and bus riders? I'm sorry. What do you say to the millions of subway and bus riders who don't have, who are going to be waiting longer and riding in more crowded vehicles?
Well, I think the service cuts that were put in place today will inevitably involve pain for our customers. We did not find a way to do that in a way that does not involve pain for our customers. We tried to go through a process of mitigating it to the extent possible, but the financial situation the MTA faces now, an $800 million shortfall caused solely by the deterioration of revenues to the MTA from taxes and by a $143 million cut imposed by the state is a hole that we have to fill, and the changes are unfortunately unavoidable given the public support that is not there.
Let me try again here, if you will. I'm sorry. What do you have to say directly to the riders and the bus lines and the subway lines? They're going to find their service cut. But what do you have to say to them?
Well, we have gone through a process of listening to people as we went through the service process. We held 9 public hearings. We had 2,500 people who came. We had 500 speakers. I think one of the things that this process shows is that we have tried to listen to people. We have made changes as a result of that. I wish we could take everything off the table. I wish we could make everything go away. The reality is the financial situation doesn't allow it. And I would underscore again that the issue in the financial situation is not that our revenues are not coming in from fares. We are receiving our fare revenue. It is not that our expenses are rising. We're actually driving down expenses. The issue here is the deterioration in monies that are coming into tax revenues to the MTA and $143 million that was cut from the MTA's dedicated taxes and diverted to the general fund.
So much of your budget comes from projections, from possible returns on investments, from what the state is going to do. Is there any sense of hope for the future that every other year, every 5 years, 10 years, we're not going to be doing this over and over and over again?
Well, I think one of the points that keeps getting made is that there's a volatility in a number of those resources. And I think the MTA has unfortunately written down the volatility that has come with the economic downturn that has been there. We don't have a crystal ball about the economy. And it's hard to feel that those resources are coming up at any point. There's professional projections that are made by Taxation and Finance, the State Department of Taxation and Finance, and we rely on those projections.
You said you're renegotiating with all the vendors. Is there any way of doing that in terms of the debt service and all the billions that have borrowed? Is there any way of going back to those arrangements?
I don't think there is an ability to do that in regard to debt service, although to the extent that interest rates allow us to be able to refinance any of that and take out savings, we would, of course, do that.
The 7.5% fare hike plan for next year on its own would not generate enough revenue to close the shortfall. Would you consider a larger fare hike, a more creative approach to fares? What other sorts of options might be available?
The first priority that we have right now is on overhauling our costs and driving down our cost structure. Getting a handle on that, getting a way to be able to reduce and turn over everything we're doing right now, I think is really our first priority. When we come forth later in the year, we'll look at the structure of that fare increase. But the first priority right now is on reducing our costs.
Mr. Chairman, we heard several board members say that the state legislature should be ashamed and should have stepped in and provided more money. How much would Albany need? What would Albany need to do to avoid future service cuts? And is there the possibility that Albany could actually step in and quickly and avoid the implementation of the cuts that were adopted today? And what would have to happen for that?
Well, I think the state always has the ability to provide additional resources to the MTA. Obviously, you have to look at the state's ability to be able to do that in the context of the $9 billion shortfall that they have at the state level and the changes that they are otherwise making. I think many people spoke today about the fact that they were not optimistic about that, and I think it's appropriate that the MTA has taken the actions that it's taken. If, in fact, Albany takes other actions, we would have to consider it.
So you're not ruling anything out?
If there's other actions, we would obviously have to consider it.
Thank you.
Thank you.